First podcast.
First podcast.
Excited?
Yeah.
A little nervous?
It should be a fun time.
It is, dude. All right, Justin. We met at a sand dune event for Wishes.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit. I wanted to have you on because I could just tell you had some crazy stories. And so, welcome to the show, dude. Why don't you go ahead and give me a little intro about yourself, and we'll just jump right into it.
All right. Yeah. Sounds good.
Where are you from? We'll start with that.
Yeah. So born in Washington State. Grew up initially in the Redmond area, then moved over to Spokane during the high school years. There, went back to the Seattle area, did a little more work there before joining up in the Army.
Okay.
Joined at 24.
What were you doing? I mean, 24 is a little late, so what were you doing before 24?
Well, I dropped out of college 3 times.
Really?
And was a Kung Fu instructor for 3 years.
Really? How early did you start in the Kung Fu?
So I started with like karate, Hapkido, and judo when I was 15.
Okay.
Studied that place for a while, traveled around a little bit, got back into Kung Fu, and then I was just there all the time training. Like the studio was open 9 hours a day. And so after a few months of that, they just said, well, if you're going to be here all the time anyways.
Might as well pay you.
You want a job?
That's a pretty cool gig, though. I mean, at that age to get started. I mean, in martial arts is an incredible thing. I mean, it's one of those, I wish I would have done it as an earlier age. I didn't get into it until military days, but with watching my kids and what they've done and how much it's helped them and how much they've grown and matured and gone through so many different challenges, because we did it on the competitive side, on the fighting side.
Perfect.
It was an incredible decision. And so now they've transitioned, they finished up what they did there, then now they're transitioning to the next one. But I'm all for everybody doing some sort of martial arts.
It's fantastic for people, just the coordination, the understanding of, body dynamics, leverage, momentum, all that stuff. It's hard to replace.
Well, there's a lot of skills that like learning how to use your voice.
Yeah.
The most basic thing that you think, and then when you see these kids learning and going through a class, and a huge handful of these kids are embarrassed to yell.
Yeah.
Or to use to raise their voice because they've never really had to.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And your voice, I feel like, is one of the most powerful weapons that you can have, and the kids don't even know how to use it. So, I mean, just something so simple as that, which a lot of parents don't even think about. Like, my kid gets grabbed. They flight or freeze, which I think most of them freeze, or they just don't know what to do, especially if they have a large person grabbing them. And, I mean, all they had to do was yell. Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah, and you nailed it. I mean, not only being used to giving those loud shouts, but, having the confidence to use it. Mm-hmm. The voice is really powerful for just, projecting your kind of mindset into people as well. So. For sure.
So you did that, and then what made you want to, at 24, join the Army?
Well, I mean, 9/11 was definitely a factor still at that point. I'd had a great time doing the Kung Fu instruction, but that one didn't have a lot of upward mobility.
For sure. You could go so far with it.
Yeah, and so I actually had just gotten done reading a Tom Clancy book, Shadow Warriors, that described kind of like, what Green Berets did. I became aware that, this is potentially a way I could learn Spanish, learn how to be a, combat medic. Thankfully, all that lined up and worked out for me in the Army career. So it went just exactly at the most ideal trajectory that it could have possibly.
So you got lucky.
Got really lucky.
Yeah. A lot of people don't understand. I'm just going to speak on the Marine side of things. Doesn't always pan out.
Right.
Like I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. I'm going to go recon. I'm going to go Green Beret. And I know so many guys end up being a cook.
Right.
A mechanic, motor T driver. And to us, like if, and a lot of people don't realize if you don't, let's say like you signed up to be recon or whatever and you don't make it, it's the needs of the Corps.
Yep.
Or the needs of the Army or the Navy, meaning wherever they need numbers, it could be a cook.
Yeah.
Guess where you're going. So it's rolling the dice. I mean, you're gambling big time by wanting to go that route. Yeah. So after reading this Tom Clancy, how do I say his last name? After reading the book, that sparked like, okay, this is something I feel like I need to do.
Yep.
What year is this?
This is 2023.
Okay.
Early 2023. So, yeah.
2003.
2003. So
okay. Yeah.
Early 2003. Yeah. So talked to a recruiter, got it lined up. Spent a couple months in MEPS, and I was out to basic training. And so,
what was basic training like as a 24-year-old going through with a bunch of kids?
Actually, Not so bad because I had just come from doing kung fu. I mean, working out, 3 times a day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was really good with the body weight. Actually, like I could do push-ups for days. At that
Yeah,
point.
so you were pretty fit going into it.
Yeah.
So that was a huge advantage. Were you look at a lot of these young kids like, what the hell, like? Because I remember at boot camp, a 24-year-old is an old dude at boot camp, especially when you're around a bunch of 17, 18-year-old kids.
Well, I landed in infantry basic training, but it was also real heavy. I think like 45 out of the 55 guys in the platoon or so were, like a lot of them were also on that 18 X-ray, the Special Forces pipeline.
Okay.
A bunch of them had degrees already, so they'd been to college.
Oh, okay. So you had a mature platoon.
Yeah, by comparison, more mature than most.
Which goes a long way because you're not getting hazed. I mean, I'm sure all of it still happens, but the little dumb shit that a kid would get in trouble for, it's not happening as much.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
A little more awareness.
Where was basic for you? Where'd you do?
Benning.
Benning? How is Benning? What time of year did you go?
That was October, so it wasn't that bad. I mean,
okay.
They still did the thing where no matter how cold it was, they would tell you how much of your, warm gear you were allowed to put on.
Yeah.
So there was some pretty miserable nights on patrols and stuff.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
That one. Of course, it was spring by the time we did Airborne there, still at Benning. And then,
so after basic, as somebody that's going to go Green Beret, correct? That's what you signed up, a Green Beret medic.
Yeah. Well, that's not in the contract, basically. What's in the contract is just saying that if you pass basic and Airborne, then we put you into the qualification course, and if you continue to pass that, then when they assign your actual specialty and your language later on.
So you got some hurdles ahead of you still. So after basic, Airborne school.
Yep.
And that's where you're just learning the jump.
Yeah, just the static line stuff. So.
How is that?
Pretty lame back then. So we didn't have the steerable canopies.
So you're just to the gods at that point. Once you're out the door.
Well, you can kind of maneuver by, slipping to the left, just pulling down on 2 of the risers to kind of tilt the canopy. Yeah. But
and that was it then. Now they can steer them now?
Yeah, now you actually have toggles, and, it's directional, so you have a little more control and ability to basically mitigate the wind.
How bad are you guys just absolutely fucking yourselves up? I mean, you see so many videos all the time.
It's pretty bad. I mean,
is it? Why?
So it depends on all the things. I mean, there can be gusts of wind that the DZSO can't plan for. That's the person on the ground measuring the winds, giving calls to the aircraft that it's safe to actually drop troops, right? There can be a, user error as well. There can be equipment malfunctions, like one of the worst probably concussions I saw. And this was actually this day I was doing medical coverage on the DZ, and a buddy of mine, his toggle broke. So he couldn't steer his canopy, and it was going down just doing circles the whole way. So he was moving as fast as the wind wanted to carry him. I mean, he just, did like 2 rolls, came up, helmet flew off and everything. I mean,
I see these. As a Marine, it blows my mind that we're still throwing people out of planes and from a static line and just watching them bounce off the ground. Yeah. I just saw a video of this woman. I just reposted on my Instagram, and she hits the ground, and she's just like filming herself, and she's like, "God, Jesus, Lord, have mercy!" And like she's just like dragging across this field, and it's the funniest thing because it's just so helpless looking to me, and I'm like, this is how we're still doing this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, no combat utility in it at this point. I'm not sure if they'll do like a cost to benefit analysis at some point. Like, how much are we spending on these people's injuries?
The VA. I feel like so many guys, veterans, Army vets. Oh, I blew my back out. Blew my knees out. Yeah. Blew my back out. Yeah. Oh, I messed my neck up on a jump. I would love to know the percentage of Army veterans, airborne vets, that what their VA is just all based off of what their jumps.
Definitely got to have a huge factor in it. Yeah, I mean, I've seen kids in the hospital I've treated with like completely shattered humerus and excruciating pain, stuff like that. I mean, so I do think there's somewhat of an argument to be made that, yes, like this does train people to perform when they're experiencing fear, fight or flight response, right?
Okay.
So there's maybe a bit of an argument to be made there, but you can get that in other ways without,
for sure,
without probably developing all the injuries that result out of static line.
So as somebody that's gone through Airborne, and obviously you've made it through the whole Special Forces, which we'll get through, do you see an advantage of us still doing that? I mean, at the same time, the reason I ask is I never thought we would be fighting trench warfare again. Right. So is this something that that should be phased out, or do you think it's just one of those things we always have to be ready for?
I think we could do without it at this point.
Really?
So, yeah.
So you don't picture us ever jumping in and parachuting in behind enemy lines again?
It's not the greatest infill method.
Yeah. And nowadays, they can just drive around with a drone and zap you out of the sky.
Yeah. I think
It's a world we live in now.
we're moving past that. Well, yeah, and despite current sort of threats of conflict, I still kind of see it, and this is one of the reasons that I'm sure we'll get to as to why I want to go into IT and specifically cybersecurity. Is I think that we're seeing more of the mainstreaming of information warfare, especially now. The internet is mainstream. There's so much access to information, and there's so much power in just the people who can control that information, and like have the gateways, the systems that it filters through, as well as the control of the software and the personnel who manage.
Oh man, we're gonna get into this.
It's not seen.
We're not even there yet. Yeah. I'm excited. I can't wait to pick your brain on that side of things.
Yeah.
So after Airborne school, and you learn how to throw yourself out of an airplane and smack the ground pretty hard. What is it? Knees together, bend the knees. Is that all you're bracing for?
Yep.
Okay, so back real quick. The first jump you ever did, you leave the plane. What's going through your head?
Honestly, on the first one, you don't really know what to expect, so you just kind of walk out the door and see what happens.
Okay, just take that step, huh?
The second one, you're kind of like, that wasn't that awesome.
So you really didn't enjoy it that much. Is it pretty violent when you're coming out and that chute gets yanked out of the back of you? Because sometimes it doesn't disconnect, right? There's some dudes that get drugged behind the plane.
That can happen. I've never seen it happen, but that can happen. Yeah, or if your line gets snagged on some equipment or something.
Yeah.
And that would be a pretty violent shock.
I could imagine.
The regular ones usually aren't too bad unless you get all twisted up, and that can be, you can get a bunch of riser burn on your neck and a little more whiplash and stuff like that sometimes. But
so you weren't excited at all the next. How many jumps do you do in school?
In school, it was only 6, and then you go to your unit and do the rest.
So after you graduated that, then what's the next step for you? So you're still on the right path. You got to be like, okay, cool, check. You're just checking boxes to try to get to your goal. So what's next in line for you?
So this has been restructured. Like almost every single general that assumed command of the training unit just
redoes
it.
That's the typical military, though. You could have the most fluent, well-flowing unit, platoon, whatever it is, and then the next person that comes in the next chain of command has to reinvent the wheel every single time, which always. Yeah. I never understood that. You would think you'd step into a unit, and be like, oh man, these guys are hard chargers. There's no incidences. Everybody's good. Why? And
this is
why
top to bottom in the military, and you see it at every rank, at every level.
Oh God!
It's somebody takes over and okay, cool, but that last guy was an idiot. I'm so much smarter.
I gotta prove everything. I get it.
And they have to, that kind of fuels their career too, to be able to, put on their evaluations
I did this.
I did this with these results.
I get it.
Totally conjecture.
100%. So after Airborne, where did you head off to?
Then went up to Bragg, and then so for myself and the ones that had just come from basic training, we went to just a month of really all it was wake up in PT.
Okay.
And all all exercise managed by the instructors who at the time, the military's progressed, I guess, just in the time that I was in it, and understanding sort of exercise science.
Yep.
Really didn't back then. It was just kind of, do as much as you can until you can't move anymore,
Max.
And then go do it again the next day.
Yeah.
So that's all we did for a month. And I actually I was in worse shape leaving that than I was because of the Kung Fu, that probably just wore me down more than anything.
I could imagine. So then what was the point of that school?
It was really more just to teach land navigation to the guys that hadn't had the type of experience. A lot of Green Berets come from other units, especially the infantry.
Okay.
Before they have to get to E4 before they apply to go to the Q course. But since we were fresh out of basic training, they wanted us to at least get some land nav in, which that was beneficial. But because the next course was your first pass or fail gateway in the Green Beret Q course, and it's kind of assumed it was supposed to be the one that was so difficult that if you passed that, it was assumed you were going to make it through the rest. So it was like a screening apparatus.
Let's get into that.
So that was a month out in Camp Call.
Where's Camp Call?
It's just west of Fort Bragg, like the main Fort Bragg, but kind of connected to the landmass. Basically.
Okay.
And so, just a more remote area where they have miles and miles of terrain where they can just throw you out there. I mean, that was the true, like, capstone event was, you had something like a 22 to 24 kilometer ruck route.
How much is your ruck? How much that weigh?
The rucks on that one weren't that bad. I want to say they were about 55 dry or something like that.
I mean, that adds up.
Before your water and everything.
Okay.
But, you know, it starts after sundown. You don't really know where you're going. Basically, you get dropped off, you get an azimuth and a distance, and you go find that point. And once you get there, they tell you where your next one is.
Oh, no. And so they're trying to get people out. So this course you're in now is like the pre-qual to Q course, correct? So they're trying to wing out anybody that's not mentally or physically strong enough.
Yep. And there was a lot of that. I mean, you'd see.
How many did you start with? Do you remember?
I think we lost 75% of the people in that.
75% of the people in your class?
And it might have even been higher. That's just an estimate. But I think it was 25% pass rate when I did it.
And you did it the first time?
Yeah.
So besides the land nav, because land nav is really, for some reason, it's one of those things you either have it or you don't, I feel like. Because as anybody that grew up in the woods or whatever, it's easy to be like, okay, these are my points of directions. You could almost, if you shoot an azimuth, like, okay, you need to head that way, and you can use topographical, features, things like that, right? But for guys that have never, kids that come from the city and you hand them a compass and a map, I mean, they're literally, I've heard of guys that have been lost for days because they just get so out of bounds and they're just gone. Is that what you guys, was the majority of that pre-qual was land nav, or was a little bit of everything?
There was land nav, there was like timed obstacle courses, time runs and time rucks, and when they did it with us, like, we didn't know what was coming. Day by day, like, that was part of the psychological stress, was they didn't tell you what you were going to do that day. So, like, we'd literally sit in the barracks all day waiting and have to send a runner to go check the whiteboard every, couple minutes or so to see if the cadre had written anything on the whiteboard. So you would get like 10 minutes notice, like, hey, you're going to go do a 6-mile run right now. And everybody has to jump up and get in uniform and get out in formation. We did team events too, all the log PT,
Okay.
Did stuff like, giving you some metal poles and like 2 tires and a bunch of weight, ammo crates or something. You had to figure out how to construct something to push it down a sandy road, and that's timed also, but you don't know what the time limit is.
And they're watching, so you don't know the time limit, and they're watching every single person and critiquing them?
Yep.
Could somebody just walk up and be like, hey, you're done at that point? Or do you have to get like peered out, or you have to fail?
Peers were a thing, and they did actually fail people for peers back then. Most of the time, they wouldn't tell you during an event that you were done, especially if it was like a team one. They weren't going to, screw the rest of the team by taking somebody out in the middle of it. But you'd find out usually afterwards within fairly short order if you were leaving. So
it was just every day, this guy's just... Yeah. Did you ever think like, fuck, this might be me? Or were you just, I got this?
I wasn't too worried in that one. I mean, I was still young and overconfident and everything, yes.
For sure.
But I was pretty confident in that one. There were other parts of the course that were nervous.
Like what? What made you nervous?
Some of the academic parts of the med course, actually.
Okay.
Very difficult just because the format was terrible for me. I mean, I'm pretty significant ADHD, so like learning in a PowerPoint classroom environment.
Oh, the worst.
And
you're running on no sleep.
Yeah, there's no learning that happens there.
Very little food, very little sleep, and then they sit you in a PowerPoint class taught by the most boring sergeant ever, and you're just trying to eat. I don't even know if you had seeds, but
we were allowed to eat and sleep during this portion because this was like way later in. So maybe we're skipping ahead there, but basically the medic course, like I said, I have no hope. I wasn't treating my ADHD at that point. It hadn't been diagnosed or treated, so like I would get to class, sit down, and I was lucky, with sitting here with an energy drink if I could last 5 minutes, and I was already spaced out.
Oh, for sure.
So I'd have to wait, sit there in 8 or 9 hours of classes, and then go home and study, and that's where I would actually learn the stuff. So that was, cut down on my time to actually learn because I was obligated to just.
And some people are like that, and it's fascinating. I mean, I have a very good buddy of mine, and we went through a lot of courses together, and he'd sit next to me, and the whole day I'm like, just trying to retain everything, try to take a note. But I'm one of those. I have to go home and just flashcards and go over and over and over. That's just how I learn. I'm a fucking idiot, So I have to just say it a million times, repeat it. And then this guy, he wouldn't even open his book, and he would just listen. He would remember everything. And I always was like, God, man, like, you just go home and drink all night in the barracks, and I'm like trying to hit the books and flashcards just to pass a stupid class.
Right.
Some people just have it. So after your pre-qual, and only 25% made it, roughly, maybe less. What's the next step after that? What's in line for you?
So after that, like I said, it's changed so much. Then it was small unit tactics. So then it was similar environment. So still out in this, fairly remote area.
Okay.
But now working as a team, just doing small unit tactics like, squad and platoon patrols, all your, how to set up an ambush, how to react to contact, all that stuff.
Yep.
So that was 6 weeks out there, and that one was fun. We had this, what are they called? It's the tents with like the round top, but they're made out of vinyl or plastic, whatever.
Oh, we call them, the hell are those called?
Well,
anyways,
whatever
yeah,
they were.
we call them the elephants, but
so they didn't have enough barrack space for the whole class, so we were in one of those, and we went for maybe a week or two straight with 3 inches of water on the bottom of the tent because.
Are you guys in cots at least?
We were in cots, and we put a bunch of wood pallets on the floor.
Yeah, you got pallet paths. Yeah, we've all been there at some point. Yeah, people don't understand. Like, they see the military, and you think so highly of it, and there's been so many opportunities where, like, how are we living like this? And you're just like, how long is this gonna last?
Yeah.
And people don't realize, like, you're living literally in a flooded tent with pallets that every time you step on them, they're squishing up. You're never dry. Your boots are always wet, and you're just miserable.
Exactly. I mean, and we were going out on 3 or 4 day patrols at that time. So yeah, it's like you're just living. You're soaked for a week straight.
I did a class. We were training on the East Coast, and it rained for. I want to say it rained like 15 out of the 21 days. I mean, it was like this typhoon that rolled in. I mean, and I ended up getting jungle rot on my feet where it was like just chunks coming off. And to this day, like because you wake up wet, putting wet socks on, putting wet boots on, and you're out on patrols all day. Yeah. And then you come back and it's raining. You're crossing rivers, streams, everything. You're up to your neck, crossing whatever, God knows what in this. It was miserable. When you can't get dry, that's when life really starts to suck. At least for me. That's my like, okay, like, you got me. Like, I'm over this. Is when I can't get dry. After a certain amount of days, it just becomes absolutely miserable.
It's not
pleasant.
I wouldn't call it fun at all.
Yeah, right.
I think of the two, being sleep deprived is my least favorite of the two, I think. But
oh, really?
Yeah.
Don't mess with your sleep, huh?
Not anymore. Well, yeah.
So after you go through your small teams training, right? Are there a lot of dudes dropping from that, or is everybody that's kind of at this point on kind of good to go?
I think we only lost one guy out of my squad or whatever at that point. So, yeah, but since they've been put through the initial gut check, this one is just more of the same. You're expecting most of those guys to pass. So
okay.
You get more of those people.
And so this still isn't even like the Q course yet.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. So that's
after that that initial one with the craziness with the whiteboards and everything.
Yep.
Once you pass that, so now you're officially in the Q course, and so this was we'd call it phase 2, but I mean it's
okay. And so after that, what's next for you in there? Are you doing Sears training and all that stuff there as well?
That was at the end, and I'm trying to remember the order. It was either language or medic was next. I think it was language. And
you get to pick your language, or do they assign it for you?
Usually, they assign it for you.
Okay.
Based on, and they try to base it on, like, they give you an aptitude test to see how good you are at, it's sort of like a simple IQ test, basically.
Yeah.
How good are you
picking up things,
recognition and problem solving and things like that. So higher scores will tend to get tougher languages, but even though I scored high on that, we were kind of, I think, an oddball class where we fell out of sync. So they just said, well, we got 4 slots for Spanish. Who wants it? Throw up your hands. So, yeah.
That's pretty. You're like, that's a pretty easy one.
Like, most people don't get to pick. Well, I was interested because that's I have family heritage there. I'm really interested in the culture. Some whole bunch of countries that are Spanish speaking.
For sure.
That are great to visit. Well, depending on the timing and the political climate.
Yeah, exactly. But for the most part, at least they're beautiful to look at.
Yeah.
So how long is the language course for you?
That one was three months is all.
3 months, and that's all you're doing all day is learning whatever language you picked.
Yeah. And that one was more fun for me. Like I was actually able to succeed in that academic environment because it's more hands-on. Like you're not just sitting there listening to an instructor lecture off PowerPoint. Like you're talking to the classmates.
Everything is Spanish.
That's hands-on. Yeah. So everything's Spanish. It's almost like a little mini immersion, but with only one native speaker, which was the classroom instructor. And then, but that was a fun little period there, actually.
Is it kind of relaxed? Or, it's not as high tempo. You're actually just you're a student at this point, not just getting hazed and going through the rituals of the Q course.
Exactly.
So it's a little break for you.
It's PT on your own, So in fact, my roommate and I trained up and did a triathlon during that phase.
Really?
All the food, lunch and dinner, and breakfast, dinner on your own. You're kind of
big boy. You're starting to get the big boy rules.
Yep.
So after language, then you're going off to medic school. Did you choose medic school, or does everybody go through it?
I got lucky on that too. They were going to make me an engineer, and then the sergeant major. In fact, no, first sergeant Bobby Senko, hilarious guy by the way. But he walks back out. He's like, we did our numbers wrong. We need 4 more medics. And same thing. Who wants to volunteer? So I was really lucky to get my first pick on language and MOS.
Really?
Coincidence, really.
Really? So you picked a medic over an engineer.
Yeah.
So you'd rather help than just blow shit up and do all that kind of stuff.
Engineer would have been fun too.
Yeah, I was gonna say because the guys that I've always talked to, we had a guy on. He was an engineer, and it sounded like a pretty badass time. I mean, you get to learn some really cool things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a medic is one of the most underrated, incredible people that you want on a battlefield.
Remembering back to some of the courses we taught, it's rated as extremely important for troops on the ground that
For sure.
they know they have a skilled medic there with them.
Mm-hmm.
Understandably so. I mean, and especially the guys that have actually been hurt on the battlefild. It's like imagining the alternative.
Yeah.
It's just terrifying.
What type of training? So this was still, I want to say old because this is probably 2004 at this point, still 2003?
I think we're in 05 by now.
Okay, 05. So the war's kicking off. It's popping at this point. So you're going through, because I guess I go through some pretty cool medic courses as a combat lifesaver, which was nothing compared to what you guys do. What's some of the crazy training? Did you guys get to train with pigs? Did you do live pig training at all?
Can't really talk about that one, but
No, you can't.
No, they get upset about it. I mean, obviously, I guess there's a line and there's a limit on that one.
Okay. I had to ask.
It was weirder back then. One of the things, this is an endless source of jokes, is we used to always do almost every single trauma clinic where basically we have one of your fellow students has to be the patient.
Yeah.
So it has to get all the actual treatments that can be done, like get the IVs, have the splints put on, and almost universally get a finger up the butt, whether it's justified or not, which is only like in some very small, like they don't even do it anymore because the idea was to test for a high riding prostate in the case of broken pelvis.
Really?
Really not that common.
Yeah, right.
But they made us do it in every clinic anyways, definitely as a form of hazing.
So what you're saying is you put your finger up a lot of dudes' butts.
Yeah, and had a bunch up mine. Right? And I mean, you can imagine, like, once you are in the team room as a qualified Green Beret, this comes up like on a weekly basis, all you medics and you fingers up your butts and everything.
Oh, so it's a running
endless,
joke.
This was nonstop throughout my whole SF career. But
good to know.
And
good to know.
At a certain point, they just stopped doing it in the course whatsoever.
Yeah, right.
This really is pretty messed up.
Yeah, this is we're probably past those times. There's probably other ways to check.
Right.
So after the medic, how long is that course?
The whole year.
So you're in a full year class. You're learning everything. Everything.
Bunch of stuff. I mean, including like, minor surgeries, things that when we go to hospital rotations, the nurses would be pissed off because, they'd have to go find, an 18 Delta to do the procedure they weren't allowed to do.
Oh, okay.
Sutures a lot of times, central line IVs, things like that.
So obviously besides the basics of like, okay, I'm a medic on the battlefield, what is your main role while you're out on a mission? I
So
mean,
you're still,
what are they teaching you? Is it everything, or is it just keep the people alive, stop the bleeding, start the breathing type of deal, but more in depth in a way? Or are you learning everything?
I mean, you're still a shooter first.
Okay.
So people always get thrown by that. Like if they ask, what's your job? And you say Special Forces Medical Sergeant. And I just stopped even doing that. It's Special Forces Operator. Because otherwise they only focus on the, or just say Green Beret, you know.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they only key on the medic. But I mean, you're only a medic, and if and when somebody gets injured, which isn't the exception, not the norm, thankfully.
For sure.
For all of my deployments, we stayed pretty safe.
For sure.
Like, I didn't have to treat too many very severe battlefield casualties.
Really?
And even so, you're not even doing that. You're doing the minimal life-saving interventions. Well, you know this from CLS. And then you leave them and finish the fight, because it's more important to have guns in the fight than have, you can't take people out to treat a casualty if you're still, you're going to take more casualties if you stop counterattacking.
For sure. Yep. Stay in the fight always.
Mm-hmm.
So all said and done, you're a trigger puller with a medical background.
Correct.
I mean, that's a pretty important role, though. I mean, how much extra gear are you carrying because you're a medic, or is it based off the mission? I mean,
yeah, based off the mission. I mean, like depending. So, if we were on vehicle patrols, obviously I brought everything I could.
Yeah.
Including oxygen, which there was always a discussion about that. Well, that's flammable. No, not really, but it's an accelerant. I can see the counter argument. I always brought it anyways, and my oxygen tank never got shot.
Right.
But we'd have. So everybody, would always have their own personal first aid kit, on their gear at some point. I would have, an aid bag. There was another medic on the team that had an aid bag for dismounted ops, clearing houses or, being out in the field fighting.
Mm-hmm.
But then the vehicle as well, I also have a bigger truck bag. My routine was to make them all universal, like packed equally. So
I was just going to ask that because it usually came down to the medic. The medic would set everybody up because you needed to know where everything was and how it was.
I did, but I was real big. Like usually, as soon as I had my routine built, one of the first things I would do, either pre-deployment or on deployment, was give everybody a familiarization class. This is what every bag looks like. If I tell you, and here's the nomenclature. So even if you don't know what it does, if I say go get that thing, you at least have an idea where to look for it.
Mm-hmm. So. Which is super important because, I feel if you don't do that, it's always when you're in the middle of that situation, you're like, I should have let these guys know. So the fact that, obviously you guys are operating at a much higher tier than your basic Navy corpsmen that we were dealing with half the time. Did you let your guys run their medic kits anywhere they wanted, or did you have them put it all in the same spot?
Shooter's choice on that one.
Okay.
That was fine. Because they're all carrying different things in a lot.
For sure.
Sometimes, like some guys are going to have the 203.
Mm-hmm.
And we got guys with saws. We got guys with sniper rifles. If the kit's different, you can't expect them all to have. Yeah. So that wasn't important to me, as long as it was clearly marked.
How was the learning? If you were saying in the past or previously that those with the ADHD sitting through these classes, how was medical school for a year for you? Was that more hands-on, so you were retaining it easier, or was it the same grind for a year?
So there were different phases. Were the ones that I struggled with were the purely academic, purely classroom ones, but the hands-on stuff, like what I was talking about with running trauma lanes on our buddies.
Yep.
That was great. Yeah. Other than getting, 3 IVs a day for weeks on.
Blowing out all your veins. We did the same thing. And you're just stuck everywhere and bruises all over your arms. And what is it when they put the tube in your nose?
Nasopharyngeal airway.
The fact that they just let us do this to each other is horrible. That is a horrible experience. Yeah. I've never had it done where it wasn't excruciating, and I've never seen anybody just sit there and be like, "Oh, that wasn't bad at all."
Correct. In fact, I've never seen anybody without an eye tear up, at least.
100%. 100%. And for can you explain what this is used for people that are listening?
Sure. Yeah. So it's fairly common, especially almost anybody who snores, if they're unconscious lying on their back, their own tongue is going to relax and can move back into the back of their throat and sort of obstruct their airway, and they can even suffocate, depending on how bad their snoring problem is, right? So you can use some posturing just by tilting their head back to elongate those muscles, but if they shift or move, that tongue can fall right back in there. So the idea is just to give a passageway, like an airway that goes behind the tongue and down into the lower part of the pharynx that at least allows them to continue breathing.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a small tube,
But it's
better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is, something that, an unconscious patient laying on their back needs to get one as soon as possible, usually.
But a conscious patient.
Yeah, it's exactly.
Not so much fun. And that tube just, God bless. I mean, when it pops and just, it's a horrible feeling.
It's not fun.
It's one of those that you volunteer for one time.
Yep.
And you never do it again.
You usually end up with a bloody nose, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A sore throat. Yep.
Yeah.
So after medical school, what's the next phase for you?
So after that would have been SEER.
Okay.
Or no. Yeah. SEER or Robin Sage. Jeez.
Or what?
Robin Sage.
What's Robin Sage?
So that is the idea is the culmination exercise. So it must have been SEER next, and then Robin Sage.
Uh,
Putting together everything you know from the Q course. So that's like your final evaluation where
okay.
you're no longer supposed to be a student. You're not learning. You're supposed to go there and strut your stuff and say that, yeah, this is me being able to demonstrate that I'm capable of doing all the stuff that I've learned in the previous phases.
Over the last 2 years, this is who I am.
Yeah, exactly.
How do they test you for that? Is it individual, team?
It's team. So there are special events, for each specialty, right? Like the engineers are going to have their challenges, the weapons sergeants are going to have their challenges, and the medics are going to have, at least one mass casualty event transpire during that. But it's sort of supposed to be run like a simulation where they have a pretend guerrilla force.
Yeah.
And you're in this hypothetical, behind an enemy line situation, training this guerrilla force that's resisting, the tyrannical regime.
Got it.
So
they're building. So you're operating as an actual SF team. You have one. How many medics are on a team? One or two? Two. So you have your two medics. You got your small arms guys. You got your machine gunner. You got everybody in this team, and then you have to go operate a mission.
Yep.
And so they're judging you, scoring you off of how your team performs. Is it overall as a team, or is it a team but they're individually judging everybody?
So you can fail individually. In fact, they don't fail teams. You can, if you're going to fail this, you're going to fail individually. But,
Okay.
Both evaluate on team events and individual things.
But every person is getting tested through their specialty of what they just went through for all this time.
Yes.
Interesting. How many guys failed out at that point?
Usually that one's pretty small.
I was gonna say.
My class didn't have anybody fail.
Okay.
At least on my team. I don't know about overall.
I feel like that by that point you should know your shit though, right? Okay. So SEER school.
I just thought it was funny, to be honest.
Really? You're the first person that's ever said that.
To be honest, yeah, like I said, I'm not a fan of sleep deprivation anymore, but back then I was, more resilient to it, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
And
favorite part of SEER school?
What
stands out to you? Like you were like, okay, that wasn't too bad.
This is something that I guess there's a term for it, which is type 2 fun.
Okay.
Something that's not fun at the time, but when you look at it back
boot camp, military is all type 2 fun. So, yeah, 100%. I get it.
I remember, it was like probably day 3 in the prison camps. Not basically gotten almost no sleep the entire time. Maybe 20-minute naps here and there.
Wherever you can get them.
Yeah, but and it's nighttime and they're playing all this weird music at you.
Just psyops, they're just messing with you guys.
Psyops music, and we're standing there raking, and just out of my peripheral vision, I watched this guy standing next to me pull out a cigarette and light it, take a drag, and so I turn to look at him and, hey bro, can I bum a smoke? And he just looks at me. He's obviously not holding anything. He's not standing in the, they're taking away everything from us except our pajamas and our boots. He's just looking at me like, huh?
Did you ask for a cigarette in the middle of SEER school?
Yeah.
Did you have to pay for that or what?
No, nobody noticed, thankfully.
Oh, really?
The prison guards, but.
So they have a legit prison built?
Oh yeah, it's a simulated prison camp. Yeah.
And that's where you're living?
Yeah.
How long is it?
So that exercise totals just about a week, where basically you have to evade for as long as you can, which usually it kind of balances out that you evade for about 3.5 days. And then if you haven't been captured yet, they'll set one up and force you into it and then take you to the prison.
Set one up what?
For
a trap?
For you to be captured.
How do they know where you are?
So I think the way they ran it for us was basically we had this, driver that was, friendly side driver that was going to smuggle us from that location to another one. But of course, they make a big show out of it. He gets stopped at a roadblock, and they drag him out of the truck and shoot him, and then drag your whole team out and put the hoods down and start interrogating you. And this is the roughest interrogation, the whole thing. Like, you answer one thing wrong, and you can't even see it coming. They're just whack, right to the face with your hood on.
So you don't know what's coming.
Yeah, you don't know what's coming. So.
So what were the type of questions, and how would you answer wrong or right? Like, are they asking, like, are you American? Like, because I know, like, we're supposed to, like, not give up certain things, but at the same time you can give them some things. Is that what they're testing you on?
Yes, and they're testing you on giving the minimal amount of information, but actually surviving the situation, because battlefield interrogations are generally going to be the roughest and the highest threat to life. Once you're a prisoner, they're probably not going to execute you for answering wrong. But
I've never thought of that.
They just might, if they don't think you're cooperating to their satisfaction. Yeah, you're probably just catching a bullet instead of going to prison. Interesting.
So in your training, I mean, they've obviously trained to let you know that, so you're doing whatever you can to make it off the battlefield, because you have a higher probability of being killed within that time on the battlefield if you're captured.
Yep.
I never thought of that. So that's really important. That's a really crucial time to make them. Is it a psychological? Is it like more are you playing a game with them you're just giving them just enough to think that you're valuable to bring you back? Because if you get back to a prison camp, the odds of living are at least a little bit higher if you make it off the battlefield.
That's probably what I enjoyed about it, I think, is exactly as you're describing. You are playing literally a game, of course, and they've given you all the answers. And, in the classes leading up to these experiences, they've given you the answers to the test. So as long as you basically follow the rules as they've put them out, or follow their guidelines, and these are, very, very intelligent psychologists have, studied this in depth. How do we survive these situations? Not psychologists only, but, all kinds of historians and things. And then, if you follow the rules, you're going to save yourself a lot of pain.
Are there guys that just fight it?
The second worst, this is a tactic too. This guy was just really failing his interrogation in the prison camp.
How? Like, just not giving him info or giving too much?
The biggest sticking point. So there was this really, really big, just jacked up guard, and everybody was afraid of this dude.
Mm-hmm.
Because even, the rules are they have to start with their hand on your shoulder, and they say they can only slap from here to there. But if they know how to turn their hips and shoulders,
it's a lot. It's full on.
Juiced anyways. It's like that's still enough to ring your bell, dude.
Uh-huh.
So, it was this guy. The guard's name was Chaos, and Chaos is interrogating this dude, and he's just messing it up. But got to the point where Chaos had him pressed up against the wall. He's nose to nose, pinching on the guy's nipples and playing with him and stuff. This guy was just shutting down, and Chaos was telling him, turn around. And he wouldn't do it. So they went and pulled me out of the yard, brought me in there. Chaos is back in his face. He's got me against the wall. He's like, turn around or I'm going to hit your buddy. Kid wouldn't do it. And just wham. And that one, you
didn't even know what was going on.
I lost a second. When I, came back into reality, I was halfway down the wall, and Chaos was holding me up by my lapels, and I think he knew he messed up a little bit. That was maybe a little too much.
You rang your bell.
Back up, yeah. And this went on for a couple minutes before the kid finally just did a 360. And you could see even the relief on Chaos's face at that point. I mean, this guy's trying to role play, right?
He's beating the shit out of you. How many times did he hit you?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, he toned it way down after that first one. But
the roles of an instructor, where you fuck up. You're like, oh, God, oops, nobody saw that one. Don't put this in your after action. Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Oh, man. So about the cages, did you go through that shit?
I didn't have that. Actually, that was one of the best parts of the whole thing. I don't think I got the worst cages, but they put me in this little maybe 3x3 box, and it was awesome because that's more
3x3 box.
Yeah, like a little concrete, 3x3 box with a metal door, and
So it's solid concrete. What's the door look like?
It's like just a metal.
Can you see through it?
No.
So you're
a little gap at the bottom, and then a door that slid open. So this is kind of funny too. I mean, I got more sleep in that box than I did the whole 3 days.
Really? They left you in there for 3 days?
No. They left. I think it was about an hour total.
Oh, okay.
But every 10 minutes or so, they would come by with a bowl of water, pass it through the little door, and so by the way, this is like July.
Okay.
So
and you're at a concrete
we
3 by
almost
3
had
box.
to do an admin shutdown at one point because it was like 110 degrees out in the yard.
Oh god.
So they tell us to go inside and clean for a little while.
Yeah.
But yeah. So you're in this box, middle of the day. It's July, and every 10 minutes they make you drink, a full canteen cup. What's it, like maybe half a liter of water.
Okay.
Well, they make you say you are. I chugged the first couple. I'm like, oh yeah, I feel pretty good and hydrated now. But I got to pee really bad. So I started dumping them out, and then, 45 minutes into this, you really have to pee. 'Cause you've just been slamming water nonstop. So I just scooted up real close to the door and pissed out the crack out into the hallway, right?
Really?
Well, then, I kid you not, 10 minutes later, this guy down the hall as they go to give water, he's like, excuse me, sir, can I use the restroom?
He asked to use the restroom when he's supposed to be a prisoner. Were you okay?
Oh
So
God,
at first, were
figure it
you
out.
like, "Oh fuck, I should have just asked," or did you hear?
It was like, this isn't hard.
Yeah, right.
This isn't complicated. I don't know. I mean, I was sad for the guy that he didn't figure out that it's just a concrete floor.
It's just
What's
piss.
the worst thing you gotta do? It's like,
right.
if it doesn't all go out, maybe you gotta smell your own pee in the corner for a little while, and then
It'll all come to an end eventually.
I'm gonna get out of here.
What tier? Because there's different levels of SEER school, right?
Yeah, so that's just the base levels. SEER 211.
I mean, but they're not doing like joint manipulation. I hear some guys they so you didn't go through any of that where they're popping joints and really just
No.
okay. But I mean, just the basic level of SEER it can be absolute hell. So while you're living in this fake prison environment, do you start to evolve like mentally that you're there, or is it do you get to go back to barracks every day, or are you living in this?
Oh, you're there. Yeah.
So does it become like a reality? Like, does it become real toward the end? I mean, how long was this? A week long or?
Basically the prison camp portion, about 3.5 days.
Okay.
But yeah, nonstop. Like so you already haven't slept for the evasion part leading up to it for the most part because
Can we talk about the evasion part?
Oh yeah, basically, you get it's kind of like, Survivor, then probably, where some of those reality TV programs that I don't watch got the ideas where you get like one tool and
So they give you a tool?
yeah, so
You get to pick, or is it given to you?
you have like a list of choices, I think.
What'd you pick?
Like that. I'm pretty sure I brought like a Leatherman type of
Okay.
deal, like multi-tool,
Yeah.
you know.
So are they dropping you off, or I mean, so they drop you off. This is before you got captured, correct? Like, so you have a starting point, and they're like, "Hey, here's your azimuth. You got to make it here," or
You have a corridor,
okay,
more or less, and then so a corridor that you have to stay in. You have some base rules, like they're land use agreements with all the owners of it, so you're not allowed to break into buildings or damage anything, right? If you get caught exiting a corridor, obviously that's a honor code violation. You're out, right?
yeah,
And then they just basically have people looking for you within that corridor. So like you'll have instructors driving the roads on quads. Sometimes they'll bring out a dog team. I think
Really?
rotate it so that everyone gets chased by a dog team at least for a couple hours.
What is that like, knowing that you have a military canine on your ass? And
I think they were actually just civilian hunters that like contracted in.
oh, really?
Yeah. But
Still though, I
Still,
mean,
yeah,
knowing the psychological warfare of hearing a dog
Right.
in the woods just letting loose, and you got to be scared. I mean, even just
and it's just that messes up your schedule. So like these are things that are taking away from your opportunity to look for food because you don't have any at this point. It's like whatever food you have, you pick up off the ground or you find out there. Which
really,
that's what was good about doing it in July. There was a pretty big, maybe 3/4 of an acre patch of wild blueberries I found at one point.
really.
But that's about that, and like we didn't end up getting any meat. If you can catch a fish or a squirrel or something, you can eat it. But
But at the same time, there's people looking for you. So how much time are you actually putting into hunting? You know, you're just foraging at this point on the move.
Pretty much, and you got to leave security up during the nighttime in case, if somebody, spots a quad rider, you might have to move in the middle of the night.
Are you by yourself? Or are you with like a platoon or?
It was like a team of, I think mine wound up only being 8 or 10.
I mean, that's a big group of guys.
And it was, there was a CW3 Black Hawk pilot who had never slept on the dirt in his military career.
Really?
His crew chief, who I think was a E5, and then like 2 Air Force E4s, I guess.
So you're screwed.
Army, you know what I mean? Army helicopter unit E4s, and none of them did anything the entire time. Like they didn't. I told them about this patch of wild blueberries.
Yeah.
It was like a half a mile away. Nah, we're going to get captured in the next day or two anyways, and then they'll give us, a half a cup of rice a day, so I'll just wait.
That's their mindset?
You're kidding, right, dude? Like,
are you guys held up somewhere, or you have a point A and have to get to a point B in a certain amount of time?
Well, I think, I want to say it probably was day 3 where they arranged that van pickup where it was really just a setup for us to get captured.
For sure.
Brought to the prison camp. So.
And then at that point, that's when you go. How did those guys hold up? I mean, a pilot's never slept in the dirt in his whole Marine Corps career. I mean, how did they hold up to that stuff?
They were not having a good time.
Really?
They were not having a good time.
Because every pilot has to go through this class, right? And the crew chief. So you're just some kid that's just a crew chief or a mechanic on a helicopter. Now you find yourself in SEER school just foraging in the woods.
Right.
So, okay, now you made it.
Right.
Where do you go for where's your first unit?
7th Special Forces Group.
You went straight there? Did you get the pick, or was this?
Well, Spanish kind of dictated that for the most part.
Because every unit, every Special Forces group has their region of operation, correct? So 7th Special Forces is South America, I'm taking it?
Well, yeah, Latin America. So
Latin America, okay.
Basically, yeah, Mexico. So Mexico, North America, but, Latin America, Mexico, then Central America, South America, everything. Anything.
Which
any
doesn't suck.
No, it doesn't at all. Those are fun deployments for the most part.
So what was your first deployment? How many deployments have you done total?
It kind of depends on how you count them, but we're in like the 11-ish range, 11 to 14.
11 to 14?
Yeah.
I mean, but conflicts, non-conflict, yours all that. I mean, as a Special Forces operation unit with your team, you've done that many.
Yep.
What was your first deployment? Where?
Afghanistan, right away.
Right to it, huh? Graduated?
November.
When were you in Afghan?
February or March.
Wow. So you didn't even do a workup.
We did a train up. I think that was January. We spent January in Hawthorne, Nevada, and then,
So you had a month off to go to your unit, check in,
basically.
Get familiar with your buddy, your new team, and then straight in the workups, and then right to Afghan. Right. I mean, in a way, that's the best way to do it, I feel like.
It's what I was
signed up for.
Yeah, it's what I signed up for.
So you're pretty excited to get the orders and the word that you're going to Afghan, or what year was this?
2007.
So your first deployment to Afghan, 2007.
Yep.
What was that like?
So that was the most combat. So in a way, I think it was a very good trip in that regulation and sort of oversight only increased as the conflict went on.
Okay.
Now, the Special Forces especially is meant to be kind of a grassroots organization where, it's the ground truth that drives most of the stuff, right? So we develop our own intel, we make our own, mission plans. We get our mission statement, and then when we're going out on individual patrols, we would brief the commander, but basically it's kind of like the commander says, here's the problem, you tell me how you're going to solve it, and then we kind of plan together and say, this is what we got,
So while you were in Afghan as a unit, are you just getting, you're just getting the intel of an area, and then you as a unit, it's up to you to build everything off of that? Or you're getting a mission statement like, hey, we have intel that there's guys operating in this valley, and you can either go figure it out if they're there or not type of deal? Or what's the day in, day out as a special operations unit in Afghan?
Sort of all of that, all of the above, more or less. So for us specifically, we more or less had sort of a generalized, region that. So for us, we were in Western Afghanistan.
Near what?
So my team was almost in the city of Herat. The next one down was in Farah. Or no, was it Shindan or Farah? I can't remember the geography. I think Shindan is north. So Herat, Shindan, Farah.
Okay.
More or less. And so, we're kind of traveling within the surrounding areas of those. And then depending on so we get fed some intel, and then our analysts will look at it or we'll browse, the resources that are available to see whatever all the contributors are contributing.
What do you mean by that?
So you have your different types of intel, right?
Okay.
You have your SIGINT, you have your humans, you have IMINT, imagery.
Okay.
Signals, of course, is communications, like intercepted communications. We were getting a lot of that back then because, the Taliban were less trained, less experienced in combating against us, so they did a lot of their communications on either open cell or open.
Which you guys are listening to all their conversations?
Not always, all the time, but we're leveraging our own collection capabilities against that. Our capabilities grew more robust over time. This was kind of early on. We had less cool stuff, but yeah.
Oh, for sure.
So all that kind of feeds into the greater sort of intel databases you can search, and then we'd find something within our area that looked, or sometimes just go out and drive around and keep our eyes open, see what we saw.
And you're operating more city-based or mountainous, or are you all over the place? How big's your AO that you're operating out of?
Oh man, it was sizable. So, and we ended up not even using those sort of hypothetical borders all that much anyways. Like we went at one point, like we went up to about, I'd say 6 or 8 hours drive north of where we were based out of, and about that far south as well. Obviously west off limits, that's Iran. And so
you're right on the border. You're close to the border of Iran?
Close. Yeah, Herat I think is the only, like the closest big city to the Iranian border.
Okay. So you guys are in these towns or these cities and you're gathering intel. What are you looking for?
So let's see, there was one interesting one where I think we were actually going to try to meet some leadership of like a local Afghan militia. And as we're driving down the highway, we see this big tour bus and stop. And so there's people coming off the tour bus. Or no, they were done. They were loading back on in the tour bus. Stopped and had the interpreters asking what had happened. Basically, these people, they'd been stopped at gunpoint to go harvest poppy. And so we go down, to the next adjacent, like kind of little village that's maybe about 25, 30 compounds, and there's just miles of poppy field out there.
Really?
Like miles in this valley. And
what's that like, seeing that?
It was wild.
Does it have a smell to it?
I don't remember it having any smell that I noticed at
the
time, but yeah, and so that was obviously pretty interesting.
I'm sorry, that was a random question, but
I
feel like when that gets, it's a beautiful flower. It's a beautiful plant.
Yeah.
So I've never put hands on. I'd like to see if it smelled good or not. Like if you're operating in an area and you got a whiff of something, like, okay, I know that smell. I wasn't sure if that was one of those or not.
I don't know. I went close to the fields. I didn't really feel like touching
Okay, so you guys weren't burning them or doing any of that?
Not at this time, no.
Isn't that crazy to think that like that's what's funding that war is the sale of the heroin or whatever? I mean, I guess you have a lot more experience with it, but I mean, you guys, it wasn't your role to destroy this drug that is feeding this war, I feel like, or at least help funding what the Taliban needed, and guys were over there not allowed to destroy this stuff.
The sort of, I guess, flavor of the of the day was that while yes, it was definitely funding the Taliban, and by the way, we even did have 2 DEA guys with us on this mission whose job it was to like persecute the actual Taliban benefiting from this.
Okay.
The prevailing school of thought that was basically that these are local farmers that are actually producing the stuff. It then gets routed into the Taliban systems and formed into opium and sold at a great profit. But destroying the crops is really hurting the farmer and the people who would rather have on, supporting the U.S. in, even if they're never going to say it and it's completely under the table, we'd rather have them be, less anti-U.S. then the Taliban are already trying to make them. So if we just destroy this poor dirt farmer's crops, and
now you just create
his
a
family
Taliban.
can't eat. Yeah, exactly. We're gaining support for the Taliban by doing that. So that was, I'm not saying that was right or wrong. I'm just saying that was the school of thought at the time.
Hearts and minds, huh?
Right. Exactly. Isn't
it crazy to
sort of
think
thing. Right.
that we're looking at this miles of opium
Yeah.
or poppy fields that are going to be processed, sent to the U.S., sold for tens of millions of dollars to feed the Taliban their income, or help at least fund this war that we're fighting. But at the same time, we're worried about hearts and minds that we don't want to turn this Taliban or this farmer into another Taliban fighter, which,
Right.
I mean, probably happen regardless.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Because the U.S. military is not the best at hearts and minds.
well, we were doing a lot better in that zone in those early days of the war.
Mm-hmm.
And it just got success. It deteriorated over time, if anything. I mean, I would say we did win some back in certain ways. But yeah, like that, the approach of putting so many conventional troops instead of like CA and
Yeah.
SIOP and Green Beret types in there definitely was, I think, a net failure.
100%. You can't turn Marines. I'll speak on the Marine side. I think you put Marines in a valley, you turn everybody to enemy real quick. I mean, we're just fucking retards.
Right.
It doesn't matter. We did a couple of missions where we helped build like playgrounds, and we were in a small little town, and we had to like escort kids to school and stuff because they'd shut down the schools. So like we would do things like that. Then you hear about some Marine like chucking a puppy off of a fucking cliff, and you're just like, God, dude, like. Or somebody burning something or shooting something. You can't turn troops loose in anywhere and expect hearts and minds to happen. Like, it's a very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
That's where it comes down to special forces group, CIA guys, small units. That's how you win that war. Not with platoons and companies and battalions of trigger pullers just running everywhere and burning and destroying everything. I get it.
Right.
So you guys are doing all this work. So as a team over there, this is a big part of that is trying to win over the local population, or you guys just there gathering intel? What's the main purpose of you guys being in your area?
Okay, so in answer to that, I just want to say real quick in relation to the point that the rabbit hole we started to go down earlier. I think we could do more for that country by just putting Starlinks in the villages. Than a lot of the stuff that we actually did in terms of like what we're talking about, where when you present it as if it's an armed conflict, even when it doesn't need to be one, then you're going to radicalize the enemy.
For sure.
But how do they work their way out of it? Because they are so isolated from technology and the information that brings it. We're talking about people that probably don't even have cell service at their house or
know what a cell phone is,
or
a remote.
They usually have them, but their electricity, like they have to charge a car battery off a generator or something to have lights in their house at night.
Mm-hmm.
Probably don't have running water.
Yep.
But how do we connect them to the external world and teach them that this ideology that the Taliban has? Well, maybe that's not the most prosperous thing out there. In fact, so
you're saying in order to not convert them, but to educate them on the outside world and what the Taliban really is, to give them all Starlink so they can just watch.
And you don't even have to do anything at that point, and that's better. Like if somebody arrives at their own conclusions independently instead of trying to have it forced on them by an oppressive force, they're going to be more open to that. And so basically just give them internet and then don't do anything else. Just let them learn.
That's a fascinating point. I've never heard it.
They're going to prosper. More so, like they're going to find out about maybe agricultural techniques that they haven't been using, or things like that.
I feel like they got a lot of that stuff figured out with their aqueducts and irrigation systems are pretty fascinating, and how many miles inland they travel. I mean, they have nothing but time. Literally I explained the Middle East is just a giant prison. It's just nothing but time to figure shit out.
True.
That's what people are like, how do they get so good at this stuff? I'm like, what else are they doing? You're living in a little mini compound with your family and 4 or 5 sheep living in the same room. You have nothing to do besides figure shit out.
I will say though, I've also been in compounds where, they have their little sort of walled compound, house at the back, courtyard in the front, metal cover over the well. You open it up, it's like 15 feet down to the water, and where they got 20 chickens running around shitting all over that clay that's 15 feet away from the running water. There's some things where they can
learn.
stand to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, by using a little Google search,
Yeah.
I can imagine. I couldn't even fathom giving some elder access to the internet from some village in Afghan. He would just, I mean, they'd probably be like, "No, absolutely not. Take this shit away."
Well, they would. That is what would end up happening, because actually the religion, is what feeds into their ability
For
to
sure.
control their people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you sort of take away or just add extra sight to that, and in the long term, I think that's really the direction that Islam needs to go. Is it needs to become more integrated with secular society, like Christianity. People, Obama loved to bring. Well, what about the Crusades? Well, that's before Christianity integrated with secularity, and then look how much better it has become. I mean, you can't argue at this point that, even though I'm not a Christian, that is a force of good in the world.
Okay.
And I would go ahead and say the same about Judaism as well, because of the same phenomena, right? These are older religions. They've had more time to integrate with secular society. Islam is newer and doesn't really have that desire. So, well, some places do. The more prosperous Islamic countries are more secular.
Oh, look at Dubai. Right?
Right?
Dubai's wild.
Yeah, and
I'm sure you've spent some time there.
I have not.
No?
Not been so lucky. But,
Got it.
But yeah, but the more rural ones, where they work directly against having schools, or where they would, work directly to destroy Starlink systems if we did put them there.
Mm-hmm.
That's because they recognize that religion is their method of controlling the population.
For sure.
The
And then
primary one.
And then when you open up those societies or communities or whatever to a secular world in a way, I mean, not just the horrible shit that comes with everything else, but just music and cultures and things like that. I mean, it's a whole different ball game at that point.
They start killing people. You try to put a school there, they start killing school teachers. Yeah. So
it's crazy to think. I mean, what goes on in this world today. That's what's so fascinating is I feel like most Americans or most people in the world have no idea like what people are being killed over for just trying to get educated or trying to just better their life. I mean, when we were in Iraq, when we were opening, we'd go in these little towns and nothing really was even going on, but they were shut down because of what do we call them back then? The Mujahideen. I think that was back in the early 2000s. They would shut down these little towns and nobody could have their little shops. So ours was just more of a show of force, roll in, let everybody open things back up. But when we would talk to these kids, we would ask like, hey, what do you need? Our interpreter would talk to them. Every one of these kids, all they asked for was pencils and pens and pads of paper. They just wanted to learn. And that was the biggest thing of these, it wasn't Taliban, but the Mujahideen, or what the fuck do we even call them in Iraq during those early days? We call them everybody was an Alibaba back then, but you Alibaba? You remember those?
Yeah.
I'll point to them, he's Alibaba. That's how they'd rat each other out. But that's all these kids wanted. They just wanted to learn. But that was the biggest thing, was shutting down these schools and not letting anybody get educated over there. And it was always crazy to me, like that. Why? Like they're shutting down these schools and kids weren't even allowed to even be in the streets, and because they were learning, and that was like the biggest threat to that area was education. And that always fascinated me, that was, out of all things, is they didn't want their people to be educated.
Right. Yeah. Which is about as backwards as you could have it in terms of priorities or respect for basic human rights. They don't recognize those the way that we do. So that's a fundamental misunderstanding, I think, the vast majority of American people on what these conflicts actually boil down to, which is sort of a fundamental disagreement over what should be. Whereas a lot of the infighting that we see, in the United States, because we're getting pretty partisan, more so each year. But generally, I think everybody kind of agrees on what should be, just disagrees on how to get there. Whereas these other cultures don't even agree on the first part. So that's the starting point for these conflicts. And that's, again, points back to information.
Yeah.
I'll harp on it all day.
Yep. And that's been going on for thousands of years, and it'll probably never change unless something drastic. I mean, you look at Afghan back in the 70s.
Yep.
Thriving, booming, some of the best not best colleges in the world, but there was incredible colleges in Kabul. I mean, you look at the city when I was working there, they had this whole wall, and you would stand there and watch, and you saw the history of Afghan.
Right.
and then where it just turned and they just went straight back to the Stone Ages, and you're just like, God, like they were on track. I mean, they had some of the top, I think, engineering schools that were in Kabul at the time. I mean, look at some of the bridges and structures that have been built in the Middle East. You look at them like, God damn, how did they build this dam here? You know, like, where did this come from? These people are living in shacks with their livestock, barely scraping by every day. Then, I mean, I know the Germans or Russians, somebody had a lot of influence over there as far as engineering wise, but I mean, you look at some of the structures, you're like, where did this come from? Where do we learn this? Because you look at it, it's just Stone Ages now. I mean, they've regressed so much.
Yeah, they have gone backwards.
And it's sad to see.
And so definitely I think there's a religious factor there. I think there's also just the amount of foreign meddling that's been in that country just almost indefinitely.
Well, it's a cauldron of different cultures, and
that's the problem too. For a civilization to, achieve prosperity and to succeed, they need to agree on like a common culture, common values, so that they can collaborate, right? Well, first you have to have law and order, and when you're constantly being invaded and at warfare, you're not
for thousands of years.
The most basic fundamental thing for prosperity, law and order, is gone. You don't even have that. But then, like you said, common language, common culture, they don't have anything resembling that.
Look how many dialects there are. I mean, the different, I mean, you have, I don't know, probably 50, at least that I knew of, like 15 different dialects, like I think in Iraq that we were dealing with. Right. Not to mention Afghan. Where do you start? I mean, then one side of the country, we would show up and you have these Asian redheaded Afghans, and you're like, where the fuck did this dude come from?
Right.
And then you go to somewhere else and there's this blonde-haired, blue-eyed, beautiful little girl. Right. And you're like, are you? I remember the first time I ever saw a blonde-eyed, blue-haired little Iraqi girl, and I was like, we got to get her. Like, she's been kidnapped. Like, I legit was like, we have to help this, because this is an American girl. What is there an American 10-year-old little girl doing in the streets in Iraq? That was my young, just stupid mind at the time. And everyone's like, bro, what the hell? Where'd she come from? And then obviously one of our seniors was like, you fucking retards. Like, there's so many, that's when you start learning that type of stuff. But I'll never forget that. I mean, this girl looked like my daughter. Blonde, light skin, blue eyed. Just, hey, how you doing? I'm like, what is going on? And then you go to Afghan and you got guys that their bloodline goes back to Genghis Khan. And
right.
I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, it's definitely a melting pot of just cultures that have tried to invade over the thousands of years and have left their stamp somehow. I mean, a little bit of their culture and beliefs, and so it's just they're spread so thin on so many different things, I feel like.
Yes, yes. So invasions, as well as actually just the fact. I mean, they were kind of just different tribes that didn't, peacefully coexist to begin with. Okay. That was forced into this one border, right? Like you said, there's the more Asian, like Hazaras up in the north. You got your Kuchi nomads. You have the more Pakistan, Urdu, Pashtun influence on the east side. Your Iranian, Arabic influence on the west side. Couldn't have an interpreter that was worth anything that didn't speak at least 3 languages or so, right?
I believe it.
And
I've worked with them. Right. Like you guys get the good terps. Us is just a normal leg unit that just on the ground every day. We get like the low tiered.
I mean, some of the native born ones were the best, though, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. Like we had American citizen interpreters that had a top secret clearance and couldn't communicate with anybody, so they were worthless.
Yeah.
Sat in the barracks the whole time.
Mm-hmm. I believe it. We had guys that trained for our deployment, and I'm actually going to see him here tomorrow. We're headed to go up north and pay him a visit. But he was bragging the whole time, and I'm learning this, and I'm learning this, and blah, blah, blah. And he'd always throw this, ask us questions in Arabic because he was a smart one in the platoon. And then we get there, and some shit happened, and they were like, well, fucking ask him. And he goes to ask him, and the guy's like they're looking at each other. And that's when we discovered as young Marines that there's so many different dialects, and all that he was training for was an area that we were supposed to go to, and we ended up going to a completely different part of Iraq.
Yeah.
And all his training. Like nobody. So we were literally just learning on the fly, like just your basic get out of the car, like put your hands up, all that bullshit.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious to me. And he caught so much shit because he was very prideful.
Oh.
I got to have him on the podcast. And he's one of those dudes that, like, everything. He's like, oh, I'm learning Arabic. And then we get there. So we had to hear about it his whole entire time learning it. And then when we get there, so he's like, yo, Aaron, ask this guy this. And it just became a running joke because nobody knew the different dialects.
Right.
So that's fat. I mean, there was guys, we had a guy show up. I mean, this dude was straight Iraqi. I mean, I'm talking, I feel like they found this dude in the village next to us. And I was like, oh, assalamu alaikum. He's like, what's up, bro? I was like, where the fuck are you from? He's like, I'm from Philly. I'm like, you're from Philly? And he had this AK strapped to his chest. This like typical just Haji beard, and the good dude looked straight Iraq, and he's like, nah, bro, I'm born in Philly, like 3-time generation, like in the U.S. And it blew my mind. I was like, holy cow! And so he grew up, you know, in it, so he was, I guess, a little bit better. But yeah, people don't understand. They think all interpreters are created equal, and they are definitely not.
Yeah.
So back to deployments. So you guys are hooking and jabbing in these cities. I mean, what do you guys do as an SF unit? I mean, are you guys just chilling a lot in the barracks? I mean, you watch these movies and all the Navy SEALs seem to just be shirtless, working out the whole entire time on their deployments until they get a mission. Is that the more the Green Beret route? Or are you guys out every day figuring out intel, collecting things? What is it?
The unit culture I've always existed in, I can't speak for, well, I don't think this is necessarily common to all units or even within the 7th group, much less the other, you know, special forces groups. But the unit culture I've always been a part of was always like a look for work type of, you know,
a what?
Looking for work at all times. Like I didn't deploy to go lift weights. I deployed to do some stuff.
So you guys are out there.
We're always proactively trying. Like if we're at base, you know, we're probably planning, and so it's kind of like just a nonstop cycle of, you know, plan, go out on a mission, come back, recoup, recover, start planning again.
Really?
Pretty much the entire.
Is this a daily thing, or you take a couple days off in between missions?
That really depended on the AO and on the mission, which like I've four Afghanistan deployments. Everyone's been different. Everyone's been very, very distinct. Like in that first one where we were mostly just doing, you know, Humvee, land, you know, ground patrols. The second one was probably is definitely fun. More civilian vehicles, civilian clothes.
Let's get into that.
Can't really.
Really? Why?
It goes into, we would have to hit the brakes real fast as far as what the nature of the mission was and whatnot. But I could say that we were very connected to CA, and I got to do some fun humanitarian stuff like vet caps there, where we went out and treated people's goat herds and stuff, which is actually pretty funny in itself.
You were treating people's goat herds?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Giving them vaccines and dewormers.
The goats. Why?
You know, humanitarian reach out.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we had a whole clinic running there at the base several days a week. They had CA and my team involved, where I would just go down and it was free for the local Afghans.
And they just bring their herd of goats and sheep in, and you guys are vaccinating them? And
at the base was people, but when we went on patrols out into the desert, which we would just call it recon. You know, we'd have, you know, local leaders that we were on good terms with, that were helpful to us, and so we'd reward them with a, you know, hey, tell your farmers, you know, we'll be back here in a week with goat medicine. And so then there's, you know, half a team of Green Berets that have never farmed before out there in the desert trying to herd goats, which is fun. You can imagine how well that went.
So you guys have done everything. I mean,
that was wild. Then next trip, we were pretty much just working one specific village. Now we were confined to the stupid M-ATVs. Really never liked that vehicle. You know, the ones with you have to control the 50 cal with a joystick off a screen that big. So nobody in the truck has any idea what's going on. And then the last one was just all like sitting on Kandahar and doing helicopter infills. So
first firefight you've ever been in?
It's a big one.
Was it? Let's hear it.
So
how did it start? What was the day like? Walk me through that day you woke up.
It started with that an adjacent team had a team member killed. And so our first movement, so they were kind of not only, all kind of in a bad space, but they had to take half of the team or so and deal with that, like escorting the body back, what have you.
Yeah.
But our commander at the time was sort of a hard hitter. So
Okay.
our team went down as, extended QRF. Basically left that night, arrived the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And so we took half their team, and then they had both an Afghan and a Romanian partner force.
A Romanian
Yeah.
partner force, huh?
Yeah, Romanian soft guys that were just partnering up with this ODA.
How were they?
Cool guys.
Yeah. They knew their shit.
They're fearless.
Really?
Tactically sound, I would say, for the most part, but
Good.
the main
That's what you want.
thing was, completely fearless.
Okay. So you're meeting up with all these units.
Basically, link up with them at the team's fire base,
Mm-hmm.
and then moved out from there. And all we did was just drive back to the same area where the incident had happened. Like, they had been searching a compound, and he was sitting in the turret, basically got his face blown off entire. Right, so instant dead. Went back to the same area and just started pieing around the village until somebody attacked us, and then we stayed there for 2 days shooting back and dropping bombs.
You were in a 2-day firefight.
2-day firefight was my very first one. I went hard.
Explain the firefight. So you guys were in there you were in there kicking the hornet's nest.
So there's another funny story to come out of this. Hopefully I'll remember to get to it. But basically, it was, we'd wound up in this sort of horseshoe area about probably a little over a kilometer across of just a U shape of, Afghan buildings and compounds in this city. We'd gone out to the middle of it with our trucks in, wedge formation V. Just exactly trying to draw fire, trying to get the hornet's nest, and they bit. And so kind of got everybody postured and more or less, like a large horseshoe facing all the compounds. From then it was just whack-a-mole. These were the days when, they would be trying to shoot at us from 800 yards away with an AK-47.
Yeah.
And we're over there with the, I was on the truck with the Mark 19, the 60 millimeter mortar, the Carl Gustav. We can reach out and touch you from 900 meters, 800 meters, but so you just wait until you hear some gunfire and just play whack-a-mole.
Really?
And
what was your first thoughts? Was like first round that zipped by you when you knew you were in it, when it got real?
It was almost, I would say that, Hollywood at this point almost gives a decent representation of, like that 30 seconds where you're kind of like, just what's going on, ears ringing, and then it just comes right all back into you. Reality hits you, and like, okay,
we're in it.
Time to get to work. I'm ready for this.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
And it lasted for 2 days. You guys take any casualties?
Minor ones.
What's minor?
So I had one guy that got some. He was an Afghan that got some shrapnel from a RPG. I think it nicked his eye, so we did evac him, even though it didn't look like it was become severe. And then I think he had some other minor abrasions from that. Then one other guy who I think it was also shrapnel.
Yeah.
He's a Romanian that basically took a piece. It looked like it had just kind of flayed some skin off, but not actually penetrated. So I just patched him up, sent him on a helicopter. But that was
damn, dude. How many rounds? Were they bringing in QRF for you guys, or were you guys ready to go and to last for 2 days?
We had basically nonstop CAS.
So there was no breaks. Even at night they didn't stop. Or was
the night was the fun part. They brought the Spectre in. And
the Spectre gunship?
And the nods just watched this big green cone of IR light come down, and then just see him just launching, lighting people up. It's just quite a thing to watch.
You guys had a Spectre gunship?
Yeah.
Wow.
We were keeping platforms. We had usually 2 or 3 stacked up, and as soon as one would go black, they go.
And going black is all out of ammo?
They go get ammo, and we'd bring the next.
That's how big this firefight was?
Yeah.
Did you guys just level the whole entire town by the time you were done with it?
No, it wasn't that bad. It was a big town. We took out a lot of compounds.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess 2 things more I'd add on this one. One is that
dude, I want all the details. Because this is fascinating. Because you hear about guys getting like a 7-8 hour firefight, and which is, I feel, an eternity. Your adrenaline is just peaked. I couldn't imagine for 2 straight days you guys are just hooking and jabbing. And then even when you're not technically in the fight, but there's still a Spectre gunship on station. That's anybody that doesn't know what a Spectre gunship is. It's one of the greatest in creations that's ever. that's ever come about out of the military, in my opinion. And it's an AC-130.
Yeah.
It's got a 20. Correct me if I'm wrong. 25 millimeter cannon on it. No, it's a big cannon on it actually.
They have multiple.
It's got a Mark 19. It's got the Bushmaster 25 millimeter. Then it's got like a howitzer cannon on this thing, and they can put a howitzer around straight up your ass from, God knows, the elevation in the sky.
Yeah, I think they were doing basically. Yeah, they just fly in circles because like you're saying, that gun's on, I believe, the left side of the ship. So they just
all three guns point out one side.
Fly counterclockwise circles, so they're banked over, and they got big old sensors up there. They just drop those rounds, put them on target.
That is incredible.
Yeah, all he needs authorization. So.
And you guys are just giving them grids and pins, and they're just leveling shit.
Yep, that building, those bad guys, get them. And so these were also the days.
This is the good old days.
Guys like you and I have lived through this and seen this process. So it's like this is one of the. It's tough to watch people that don't understand this at this point. I mean, I get it. Not everybody's experienced what we have, but in these days, they actually evacuated their own civilians, right?
The Afghan did?
Yeah, almost every firefight I got in on that deployment. Like the very next one, this was a big city, so all I did was just move back into the city. But the very next firefight I got in on this deployment, we were, trying to get in there under cover of darkness. So like, as we were probably a kilometer from this village, the sun was just coming up, and there was a whole caravan of like tractors and Corollas and motorbikes with all the women and children and elderly people piled on them. And Terp said hi to him and said, the guys down there, all the military
age males,
all the fighters, they said that there's going to be a fight with the Americans, and so we're going to go hide in the hills until you guys are done. That's how it was going down back then. Yeah. You don't have to worry about this stuff where they intentionally try to use them as human shields.
Those were the early days, though. I mean, that's when we would take over cities, and they would literally build a berm around cities. And, I mean, it was all just anybody that was left behind was military-age male. I mean, we would sit there and do the security and watch all these people run checkpoints as everybody was coming or going, and they would tell everybody, and they would fly flyers and drop flyers out of helicopters, and, like, if you're considered a military-age male and you're left behind, like, you're hostile. And that's how it was for you guys? Makes it easy because you know who you're fighting.
Yeah, exactly. I
mean, you open a door and there's a dude standing there. He's catching around, military age male.
Yep.
I mean, that's how it was, right?
Yeah. I mean, so one other thing I want to tell you about that fight.
Yeah. I want to know it all, dude. I want to know it all.
You know Fulcrum, right?
Yeah.
So
the A-10 pilot?
Yeah.
I want him on the show.
Oh, he'll probably do it. He's the one I think that told me about you first before we even met. But so. He lives here, right?
Yeah.
And his guard unit's out here. And before the A-10s, they had either F-15s or 16s. So I think it was even the very first time I met him. So 2012, we got on to, like, my sister and him were just either dating or engaged at the time. But we're just hanging out at a bar in downtown Boise with his pilot buddies and start talking about deployments. And within about 10 minutes of talking to one of them, so you guys were in this horseshoe shape and you had your vehicle. I was at that fight. So 5 years later, after my very first firefight, I meet one of the pilots that was dropping cast for us on that day in Boise, Idaho. I mean,
it is such a small world, man. You know how many, like, I'm not shocked by it. It gives me goosebumps, but I'm not surprised. I've had so many incidences where vets met that were fought in a unit together, or these types of situations, was a medic on a different team that helped. I mean, there's so many of those stories where guys, one of my best friends ended up, he's got an incredible story. He was our very first episode we ever did with James Nash, and he was on a mission and they were doing a bunch of shit. I think the guy was an Aussie or a Brit that were helping them. Anyways, they ended up, James posts like a picture on Instagram, and this guy randomly messaged him. He's like, hey, was that in this town, this look? And they did this huge push together, and the guy found him off of Instagram and ended up having him on his podcast, and they talked about the firefighter, the mission that they did was a huge push. But yeah, it's insane of how many guys, like, if you actually stop and like, okay, were you here at this time? And so many paths were crossed.
Yep.
I ran into a guy 2 years back to back, 2 Thanksgivings. I spent 2 Thanksgivings back to back in Iraq, and I ran into the same guy in a chow hall on Thanksgiving, both deployments.
Oh, snap.
And we were in boot camp together.
Wow.
Random shit, like it's a small world, man. That is hilarious that you were running a mission in Afghan.
Yeah.
The air support that was coming in and dropping ordinances on everything.
Yeah.
That pilot ends up dating your sister. And
No, is one of his buddies.
One of his buddies.
Yeah, Fulcrum's we've gotten close to deploying at the same time, but we've never.
Still, regardless,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hilarious that you
Yeah.
you guys are able to put the pieces. I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
So you said there was something funny in that first mission, or was that?
That was it.
That's hilarious, though. I mean, it is a random ass thing to be able to meet somebody.
It's pretty cool.
Small world. That's the cool part about the military, is being able to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and guys being able to be in the same area and things like that. I mean, it's that's what makes it cool, and that's what that brotherhood that is like unbreakable, because you could just meet somebody and know you're in the same area, or some guys took over a town after you or something like that. I mean, we had a recon team. We had a dog, and we named her Xena. I have pictures of her, and I found her in a trash pile. And we washed her all up and started feeding her. She was like our pet. She rolled everywhere with us. And we had a unit take over. A recon team took over this little outpost that we were sitting on forever. It was the worst. It's the worst fucking thing ever, staring at a road for like a month. Anyways, these guys ended up taking that dog over, and I ended up meeting one of the recon guys that took over from us years later, and they said that dog was with them the whole entire time, and one of the guys ended up bringing the dog back. And it came to the States, and I tried to track it down, and this was way before social days and being able to have everybody's contact. But I would love to have seen where that dog ended up, because she was badass. I mean, she would go on patrols and like would run out and find the sheep herd. Like we'd be in the middle of the nowhere, and she'd just find a sheep herd or something. They have that nose, and so she would alert, and it was cool. But knowing that a recon guys ended up taking over, and she stayed with them, and then that unit ended up bringing her back, which was pretty cool. I ended up talking to a guy, and I showed him pictures, and he was like, "Holy shit, that's her!" Like, it was pretty cool to be able to see something like that.
That's a huge success.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious.
Dogs, I mean,
imagine being a dog in Iraq, living in a pile of trash, literally a pile of trash. Like I was digging through this pile trying to find something to burn because it was freezing, and then she moved, and it scared the shit out of me. I was like, "Oh, it's a dog!" And so, we ended up feeding her a freaking barbecue pork rib. I think she got every one of those MREs, in the pot roast. It fattened her up real quick. Right. Yeah, she was great, man. We had her the whole time out there. And yeah, she ended up, I guess, making it back. She's American now. I'm sure she passed long ago, but yeah, the golden ticket for sure. So firefights, dude. So as an SF unit, I mean, it's got to be pretty incredible to watch, like just the shoot, move, communicate aspect of a unit built like your guys's. Or do you ever get to sit back and just like, I don't want to say enjoy, but watch the tactics? Or because obviously you said in the beginning of this episode that even though you're a medic, you're a trigger puller. You were 100% a gun on the gun. That's your main purpose. So like, did you ever get to sit back and like watch the maneuverability and the tactics being deployed, or were you always just in it?
Watch, in a vague sense, one of the things that reminded me of is so completely different theater, completely different deployment.
Okay.
But if we wanted to switch over to Honduras, wasn't necessarily like right there in it watching, but
why are you in Honduras?
Oh, so this is mostly. So the entire basically Latin America theater mostly kicked off and revolved around counter narco trafficking.
Okay.
But it's kind of evolved to transnational criminal organizations, because actually, human trafficking at this point, and especially child trafficking, is actually more profitable for the cartels. So really the same mechanisms for the most part. Just it's smuggling, but they've changed a lot from smuggling drugs to smuggling people. They still smuggle drugs, but they make more off people. So it's counter all of that, basically.
Is that the whole point of 7th Group, is by being down there, are you guys, is it more counter trafficking, counter drug movement, or what's the point? Like, because every group has their region. You have Asia, South America, or Latin America, middle, whatever. But why there? What's the? I mean, is it because there's so much drugs being brought up, and that you guys are down there counter
all of it? Yeah. So I guess the missions vary down there too, and it's not kinetic, right? So we're either there generally as like as instructors, right, to help bolster their military and police, or we're there, at best as advisors, which is what we were doing in Honduras. And there were like missions where our Honduran partner force will go out to actually interdict. Usually it was MSA Trace in that country.
Okay.
And so we would go with the command to the sort of last cover and concealed position and watch them do their op, and so we could give them if anything
really
pointers on maybe next time you could think about this or that or the other. But most of the stuff that I was involved in down there was just literally like going and being an instructor. So we would have a partner force that the coordinations had been done through the embassy, and so they would have asked, they would said, our unit could use training on this, that, and the other. And of course, marksmanship's usually up towards the top of it because they just, a lot of them can't afford a lot of range time just because of the sheer cost of ammunition. So it's so much fun going down to Latin America, teaching marksmanship in Spanish, good times.
So that are you living in a house or are you on a base? So you're just
depends
on the country area or what? Threat,
yeah.
Because I guess so the sole purpose of you guys going down there is to train local militias, if there are any in this area, or is it just government agents?
Military and police, yeah.
Military and police.
So, in fact, like Colombia has actually been a really good model of this because SF started doing that in the 80s.
Yeah, I've heard a lot.
Most of it isn't us running the training. We're actually training the instructors who train their own people.
Got it. So you're instructor trainers.
Yeah, in a lot of the places that we've been, it's just training the ground troops.
So you're down there just partying, man.
We've definitely
you can admit it.
Fun.
You could admit it.
Fun as well, because usually on those trips, we'll at least have Saturday off or something. If not both Saturday and Sunday, and then during the work days, it's still a long day. We're doing 10, 12 hours on the range, but there's still time to go get dinner afterwards or whatever. So yeah, we had some fun down there.
Man, you're in South America, or Latin America, I should say, and you're eating food. They got probably the best food.
Yeah, and
are you married at this point, or are you single?
Always single.
You motherfucker, dude. You were living life down there, huh?
Oh yeah, that's one of the reasons I stayed single.
Yeah, I don't, dude. 100% coming back, divorced.
Right.
I could. No way. That's not a married man's deployment down to Latin America by any means.
No.
Damn, good for you though. That's pretty awesome. So how many countries did you go and train?
So we knew Chile.
What's Chile like?
Chile was so I only got to see Santiago, and then at the end a little part of the Andes where we went and did a final hit with the students. Santiago was very, very European looking. I'd spent, I think, about a month traveling around Europe in my teens, going to mostly just the capital cities, and I walked into Santiago. I feel like I'm back in Italy or something.
Yeah.
But pretty cool. Had fun with the people there. They're very, very, very well-mannered, very, very polite.
Okay.
You always heard in language school like that, where you're learning like the high Spanish, the Castilian Spanish that makes you sound like like if we're the English language, you'd sound kind of like a, British hierarchy is like the Queen's English. It sounds
very proper.
Yeah, you sound kind of, well, Santiago wasn't like that. They were speaking very close to what we were taught in the schoolhouse.
Oh, okay.
Made it easier probably for my first deployment. So that was a fun trip. It was quick though. It was 6 months. Not 6 months. 6 weeks is all. So we were busy.
Yeah. So, man, you got to see some pretty cool countries.
Yeah.
You're very fortunate with that. So you mentioned in Afghan you were doing a lot. Well, your last deployment was out of birds. What did that consist of?
so this is again going to refer to the rules and restrictions ramping up so high at that point. We basically kind of paralyzed ourselves. There was a requirement, I think, to have at least 2 drones or platforms with optics on every mission. And by the time you made all the coordinations, but usually the intel was bad, and besides that, the Afghans had so many years at this point to figure it out. Like, they had robust early warning systems, even if it's just people on cell phones. Like, they might not be able to see these helicopters flying at night, but they know, they can hear which direction they're going, so they don't have to do a lot to figure, the helicopter's going on this azimuth.
Mm-hmm.
Who's in that direction? Okay.
And they're on the hook already.
Yeah, go call them, tell them they're going to get hit, and they generally bounce out before we even got there.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that frustrating?
Very.
What does that do to morale after a while? I mean, by the time you go through the hoops, you're playing the political game with our government and military instead of just turning you loose to be able to do what you do. Now you're going through all this bullshit, and by the time you're getting to these villages, I mean, your targets are gone. They've already gotten the phone call or radioed. I mean, that you guys are coming, because it's fascinating. I don't think people understand how incredibly well they communicate. Even though we look at it and it's primal or Stone Age technology compared to ours, I mean, it travels quick over there.
Yep. So, to answer your question, the biggest thing I got out of that was basically just this real world frustration of, in the ability to say at this point, like, I've overly bloated bureaucracies, and anything that becomes too bogged down to where it loses efficiency to the point that it can't even accomplish its core mission, like whether that is the government, and this isn't specific to the Army, this isn't specific to Afghanistan, this is a large amount of the government, a large amount of corporations. I think they're more generally mobile, so you see them now kind of like a lot of places cutting their DEI staff. They've realized this is administrative bloat, this is costing money, and it's not adding anything really to the organization. The DoD, I would say, is a much bigger ship. It takes a lot longer to turn. I hope it goes back in that direction, but my last, I would say, at least 5, if not more, years in the Army have been just kind of sitting there shaking my head.
Is it sad to watch, like, you joined the military in the early days, like, the early war days, you went through all of this incredible training, had some pretty intense deployment, and then to watch the bureaucracy of our government and politics take over the military and just turn it into what it is now?
Absolutely, yeah.
And what year did you get out?
Just this year.
That's right. I knew you were fresh. I thought it was last year. So, I mean, you got to see all the changes.
Well, a very high degree of them, and it's not been fun to watch. I mean,
and even from an SF unit, it should be like the greatest time, because nobody fucks with you guys.
It's
should at least
that sort of trend is occurring in even within the last 2 units that I worked at.
How so?
So just sort of the piling on of additional people who have a say, and usually are going to use it to say no. Like, this really is directly out of the Office Space movie, where he's talking to the efficiency experts, the Bobs or the Bills, and he's like, I have 7 different bosses. It's exactly that. It's like, when you have, only X amount of people who are actually going to do work, and then 7 people to tell them how to do it. Nope, can't do it that way. Or you can do that, but you have to accomplish these other things too. It's like, well, then why do we even bother? It's like this.
Yeah, very frustrating.
Paralyzing ourselves.
You're getting rules and regulations handed down to you by somebody that's never stepped foot on a battlefield.
Straight up.
That's got to be very frustrating, especially at your guys' caliber of war fighters, training, everything that you've gone through. Now you have some college grad that somehow got into this position, and now they're making the shots.
Right. Yeah.
I can see that kill morale real quick. What deployment did that start to change? What year?
There's been a slow creep.
For sure.
I would say that even in the 2013 one, we still had a decent amount of leeway to call our shots. It was more, I'd say it started to creep in hard around 2015, and then my 2018 one was just that was the helicopter one. Where it's like we got nothing.
So you guys are just flying and putting yourself at risk, being out of the wire like that because you're playing the political game, and how often did that happen?
Oh, I mean, every single op we did on that whole deployment ended up being a dry hole.
Really?
Yeah.
The whole deployment?
Yep.
How long was that deployment?
That was at least 6 months.
And you guys are just burning fuel and putting your life at risk out there because you got to jump through hoops to even leave. I mean, was the protocol? Is that what changed a lot? It was like you having to have so much intel and the planning. Like where did they put the brakes on? Like what really slowed it down for you guys? Like why did it turn so much?
There were a bunch of things that was definitely included. So yeah, having sufficient intel, and then really just being able to get out the door while it was still actionable was tough. For one thing, there was also competing for resources. I think we were already scaling down at that point, and every other unit had that same requirement, but there wasn't enough of that requirement to support all of the missions.
Mm-hmm.
You would get prioritized, and maybe you would end up high in the queue, maybe you wouldn't. But either way, it was still usually a long enough lag time that it made the whole op irrelevant.
So you went from like, hey, we need to roll now to, well, this has to be submitted, it's got to be approved, and it has to go to the next chain, and then it has to come back down to you guys, and that could be days? Or what are you talking time-wise, a week or days?
Weeks to be staffed and resourced, yeah.
You're waiting weeks to run a mission.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, holy shit. And then by the time you guys do, I mean, it's Afghan. Those dudes disappear in the blink of an eye. They've been doing this a while. That's crazy, man. That you guys went from top tier operating with Spectre gunships to not even being able to go on a mission and capture or do whatever you're supposed to do because of the politics getting so involved.
Mm-hmm.
That's the frustrating part. I posted a video from one of our clips the other day, and I asked the audience, like, would you let your kids join the military now?
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion on that?
Be real hesitant.
There's a lot of reasons. I had a guy that I deployed with. I did 2 deployments with. He stayed in. He's actually, I think, a major or captain now, one of the two, which is mind blowing. If I just asked him to come on because it's the stories that this dude, and to watch him now, like, leading battalions and things like that, it's hilarious to me. But he had a good point, but at the same time, it's look where we're at.
Yeah.
Every dude that I know that commented on that, absolutely not. People were like, not just no, but fuck no, I would not let my kid. They're all dudes that served. And so it's a tough decision. Like, I wouldn't steer my kids. I wouldn't steer them away, but I wouldn't encourage them to join the military. Like, if it was a pride thing, probably that feels the same how my dad felt, then. Mm-hmm. I would be proud of them, but I would not encourage my children to join the military, knowing what we know now.
I guess I would put the qualifier too, that a hard no to combat arms, anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Like don't go be a shooter.
No.
As much fun as that job used to be, do not go be a shooter now because they don't have your back. To go into something else like intel or cyber or something like that, then sure. I mean, go be an officer, get that fat paycheck, sit in an office, don't get shot at. But
what do you mean they don't have your back?
I mean that.
Like, if you screw up, you're done?
Well, no, there is still a pretty high extent of that. I think everybody, whether they even drank or not, my last unit was like, the fact that you can now be like, you can have 18 years in the Army and be a senior E7 or an E8, even an E9, you get a DOI, you're kicked out,
you're
and
done.
Screw your retirement, and they don't even, but beyond that, the tendency based on that administrative bloat phenomenon to, just like we're seeing in Israel now, put additional restrictions that endanger the lives of the shooters on the ground to protect the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we're at. Yeah, there's so much wrong with that. So much wrong with that.
Yeah, it's a weird time, man. It's a really weird time, like where we're at and just the way that I'm really curious to see where it all unfolds. Yeah. There's so many different conflicts right now. And then you bring in, and, I try to, for the most part, stay out of politics, but it's just impossible these days. Like,
you can't.
And then you hear about everybody talking about how Trump's going to be this dictator and lead us to war. And it's like, I look at everything and I'm like, God, like we weren't in any wars.
Right.
He was shaking hands with North Korea. He was putting tariffs on all these countries and we were making money again. It's like, then you look at us 4 years later and you have Israel, Iran, you got Ukraine. And it's just, and there's more, and there's a lot more coming.
Yep.
And it's like, you know, and then you watch the warfare now, which is fascinating. And I've talked about it a couple of times on here. I never thought in a million years we'd ever be in trench warfare again.
Yeah.
And now these dudes are just sitting in a bunker and getting taken. That's where I have a problem. That's where I would be devastated if I would not have, if I got a call that my kid got taken out by a drone or something.
Yeah, for real.
Taking a shit, and all of a sudden you just hear a beat and buzz coming at you, and that's it.
Those drone swarms are scary. It's scary stuff.
It just happened down in South America. One of the presidents or somebody I saw, like the drone flew in. It just happened like last week.
I didn't see that one.
And this drone came over the stadium and blew up, I guess, early, and it was right after Trump's attempted assassination. But
Dang.
It's like, it's coming, man. They're gonna start using it everywhere.
Scary stuff.
There's drone simulators now that you can pick the weapon, the bomb you want strapped to it, and they're training people how to do it. It's fascinating times.
Yeah.
Fascinating times.
Yeah.
So now that you've transitioned out, what's life like after war?
Mine's been pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, single, no kids, so I got to take myself on a little sabbatical.
Yeah. How was that for, I mean, it's got to be incredible for the mental health alone.
Yep. Morale-wise, yeah, it's been great. So, yeah, just me and the dogs and then all the toys.
You just lived this free life, just traveling.
Got my quad, got my kayak, got my mountain bike, and a bunch of guns. Yeah, and I set the whole sort of setup to be, you know, very capable of boondocking, you know, off-grid camping. So I found some great places in like Colorado and Utah where you just drive out, you know, an hour from the nearest paved road, set up camp, and shoot the gun, ride the quad.
Damn, living the life, huh?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of guys that get to do that, especially straight out, because most of them I feel come out married, divorced, families, kids, not. I mean,
Right.
You go right back into the flow of things, but you're out here just.
I'm ready to get back into, you know, doing something.
Okay.
I thought I would probably spend at least a year doing that, but I'm already kind of, okay, all right,
You're ready.
next? What's next?
Well, because you've lived such a high tempo life,
Yeah.
and then now you go from max the red line to sit in the woods. I mean,
Yeah.
even though it's super relaxing, it's the greatest thing you do for mental health and to get yourself back on track.
Yeah.
A guy like, I feel like you, that has gone so hard for so long, it's one of those things you can't sustain your body and your mind. You get bored, or you just need the next challenge.
It was good. I think that was, yeah, being able to take that break, let sort of the stress receptors reset and whatnot.
It's good.
You know, and I definitely needed that.
I feel a lot of guys don't get that opportunity. I know guys, because right now you and I are right at the same age. Like I went in right at the end of 03, beginning of 04. I only did 8 and got out, but I have buddies that are all retiring right now. And I look at them like, fuck, I'd be retired, you know? But at the same time, some of them are going straight back into work.
Yeah.
I'm talking got out and drove home, and like I see within a week they're posting like this new job. And I'm like, take the time.
I've known people that have done that too, and sometimes because they have to, but sometimes
I get it.
Actually, they just really get bored that fast. Also, that's also a thing that I've seen other people do. Where like they thought they were gonna retire and chill, and then like, no. Well, I think you know some, like I could say one at least specific person who just missed the camaraderie and the like, you know, being collaborating with a team of like-minded people. They miss that stuff. Need that
for sure.
Socially.
For sure.
I think there's definitely a, you know, just for general, you know, mental health, it's important to be engaged a lot of times in something in work that you find meaningful and where you're giving back something to society at large too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I needed a break.
Now that you got it.
Now that I've got it, I'm ready to actually get a hard roof over my head. And
really, you're looking to settle down a little bit?
Yep.
What do you want to do? What are you looking to do? Because I know you've been playing around with the cyber side of things.
Yeah. So actually, right here, Fulcrum gave me a lead on this. Ran it down. It's Mission 43 has a program that I will most likely be starting in November. They haven't said no yet, but basically I think they take applicants up to October and then decide.
Okay.
It's hard to imagine who's going to be more eligible than I am.
For sure. And what is it? Can we talk about it or no?
This is basically a free program that's, I think they're all paid for by Albertsons, right? And so basically a free program for vets or family members or active duty where over the course of, I think, 12 weeks each, you rack up 3 SANS GX certifications, which are, good qualifications to have for anybody wanting to go into IT. And those, so to me, I've even actually, I'm going to start it back up. I've already begun a degree, online degree in IT, data networking and security. I'm going to pick it back up now, but the certs, this is the word on the street, this is the word from, websites that track it and from employers, from the word of mouth of employers themselves. Yeah. The certs are more important than the degree for getting employment in this realm.
Yeah, for sure.
So
why that route? What intrigues you about that? Like going from an SF unit to now more focusing on the IT security side of things. Did you learn and get to see some shit over like while you were in the SF unit that made you go this route, or is this something just completely new that fascinates you?
Well, so the hard technical side of, securing information systems is, not as familiar with it, but, I have quite a lot of familiarity with more of sort of the good, correct practices, right? Because obviously, I've been working around classified information for my whole career.
For sure.
And held a TSSCI for the last 8 or so years at this point. Like, so already have the security mindset, and we could definitely say that for the specific role I want, which is within cybersecurity, the subspecialty of penetration tester, there is a decent amount of crossover between that.
What is a penetration tester?
Okay, so basically to put it into military terms, and I can try to explain it more civilian as well, just this analogy makes the most sense to probably me and you at least. When you have a simulated battle and there's an operational force that acts as the enemy force to attack your friendly forces and try to find weaknesses that they can exploit and vulnerabilities. That's for the purpose of training, the good guys, air quotes, and identifying their weaknesses so you can make recommendations on how to improve.
So you're going in. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So basically, pen tester is the exact same thing, more or less, just on like the corporate and cybersecurity side. So it can be everything from involving, looking for, just like with everything else. In the military we call it OPSEC, but in cybersec-wise, it's usually the human domain that's easiest to target. Like finding people who have weak passwords or will respond to phishing emails. So finding those, finding physical security deficiencies that they might not have known of, and then of course the main part is going to be finding, technical or basically software vulnerabilities that they weren't.
So you're going in and just testing the perimeters on these companies and just and outing them for their weak spots.
That's the long-term goal. I'm not nearly qualified enough to do that yet, but within a as little time as possible, I'd like to be looking for work, at least if not that job, maybe a preparatory job working up towards doing that within a couple of years. Sometimes they'll want you to have a little experience before you jump into that, which is seen as at least an intermediate, if not advanced role, right?
Man, that's pretty incredible, though. I mean, it's a big world right now since everything is going that route. I mean, look at they said it was a power outage or something happened with all the airlines. I mean, they said it got hacked. It didn't get. So you living on that side of the world now, like what scares you in the cyber world?
Plenty. I mean, so, we've gotten to where a lot of our critical infrastructure is extremely dependent on, information systems and properly functioning, exchange of information working correctly. And it's very vulnerable because there's not, within the government or civilian sectors, there's just not enough people qualified to do this type of, the defensive side of this.
Just fascinating.
And it's, just continuing to increase. The more reliant we become on technology, the bigger that need gets, and the bigger that vulnerability gets. And I think that, while, it's sort of the same as everything else, we're kind of in stalemate with a bunch of the, most of the world powers. There's always going to be your bad actors, like the literal equivalents of like Hamas, existing in the IT realm as well, who are just out there to just create chaos and destruction just because, there's always those psychopaths in every domain of warfare. So they definitely exist out there, and they can do so much damage if it's just, allowed to run free. So it's very important for for world peace and stability for this need to be addressed.
For sure. How weak or soft do you think our infrastructure really is at this point?
Well, we have seen that they definitely, every year the number of attacks increase, right? The number of cyber attacks, it's steadily increasing every year. The main ones that succeed we hear about, when just as with anything else, the ones that don't succeed and that we don't hear about far, far outnumber the ones that do succeed.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right? Both quantum computing and AI represent an ever-growing threat to this, because the more AI becomes accessible to those potential bad actors, they're not, a major world power, but are just essentially cyber terrorists. Like that's going to grow as access to these things increase.
It's the way of the future.
Right. So, there's I guess, as with anything else, like I like to try to maintain a very optimistic, outlook, with the caveat that there's a lot of work that needs to happen.
Oh, I could imagine.
To make sure that we can continue to maintain that optimistic outlook, right?
Where do we start?
Right.
Yeah. Where do we start? I feel like these last 4 years have just been such like the positive to this last administration. I guess it just shows us where all our weaknesses are.
Yeah.
It's opened up everything to let us know, like, look what just happened. How do we let a kid crawl on a roof?
There's been a lot of eyes open, I think. Can we talk about Biden?
You can talk whatever you want. Let me hear it, dude. Let me hear it.
Look at that, that being, I guess, one of the first examples I go to. I remember, talking to like family members in 2020 and just saying, how can you be thinking about voting for this guy? The cognitive decline is so obvious. But, and these, by the way, being people who, like, it was like 3-4 years, well, I guess 2-3 years after the event, already we're still unwilling to watch a video, a 29-second YouTube clip or whatever that proves that Trump said he wasn't talking about the white supremacists when he said the very fine people thing, right?
Yeah.
How can you just watch, just get a little more information, like, because whatever your information outlet is, it's failing you.
For sure.
Right. And so, a lot of us been watching him, have lost track of how many times he's attempted to shake hands with thin air on stage, or, the falls, like, and there's people just had no idea, until apparently, 2 weeks ago, it's, oh, wow, that thing you guys were saying, almost 4 years ago at this point turns out to be extremely true. Now we'll admit it because it's become too obvious to ignore.
Can't hide it anymore.
Right.
But like, how do we treat the, they call it the deranged Trump syndrome and all that stuff, because it's so crazy to me now. And this is the craziest part, and I think the worst part about this last political environment was it has drawn such hard lines, and every day the lines get even deeper and deeper, and then now, and I had this discussion not too long ago. It's like, when we were kids, we didn't care who the president was. Even when I joined the military, it didn't bother. I wasn't joining because, oh, it was Bush or it was Biden or Obama or Clinton, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But then now there's been nobody cared. And then you could have a husband or wife that had different political beliefs. It wasn't so crazy. Yeah. Now everything's been so radicalized on both sides.
Yes.
But I try to step out of all of it, right? And look at the political, because I've said it and I'll die on this hill. I'm fuck the government at this point.
Oh yeah.
Left, right, all of it, fuck everybody.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Yep.
But with my beliefs, my religious beliefs, whole family beliefs, how I want to raise my kids, if I'm going to vote and I'm going to pick a side, it's going to be the right side, right? That's just me. To each their own.
Yeah.
But then, and that's how and nobody should care. But now it's gotten to this point where the left has gone so far left, and what they're pushing in this transgender movement. And I argue with this guy, and it's a natural it's a natural thing. It's been going on and I'm like, if you look at the curve of this transgender movement, a natural curve would slowly grow in numbers. Yeah. You go from these basic numbers and then grow a little bit, and then all of a sudden there's this huge spike in the last couple of years. And when you look at any chart and there's a massive growth, it was pushed. It was forced. There's an agenda behind it. Yeah. And so I just look at it and I'll talk to parents and I talk to these husbands and they're like, oh, well, I want my kid can do whatever they want. I'm like, your kid can do whatever they want. You're going to support your child going on hormones, puberty blockers, all these crazy things at a young developing teenager's life where everything that's going on in their body around them matters, and you're going to allow that's where I'm like, I can't support this. Yeah. But then now I look at somebody like, oh, I'm Biden, I'm all about Kamala Harris. I look at them like, holy fuck, like so you're supporting everything. That just blows my mind. But then I'd see how they look at the right, and I'm like, well, how are you looking at us that we want wholesome families, we want families to stay together, they need to be run by a man in the household, a father needs to step up. We're not trying to soften these dudes and make everybody a soy boy. Like, that's how I'm looking at it. So it's like, but now the lines have been drawn so hard. I can't look at somebody and have somebody in my life that's going to be like supporting everything that I'm against. Political, religious, whatever it is. Yep. I look at it and it's like, it's crazy where we're at now. Crazy to think how far we've divide and conquer. It's one of the oldest things, and we've said it for years, but then you look at the left, and like, that's not happening.
Right.
You're going to support Antifa burning all this shit down. And the fact that this kid took a shot, shoots the president in the ear, and people are cheering and been like, well, don't miss next time.
Yeah.
And this is...
So much to say about that I'm having to kind of think about where to even start. But
right.
I think that the main thing that I like to say in response to that would have, well, two main, I think, phenomenon on the left driving this. And yeah, as you said, lots of good data on this. Pew Research, I think, has the best that I've seen on the hyperpolarization, the increasing polarization every year. But I think two of the biggest driving factors boil down to essentially Marxist ideology and postmodernist ideology. Okay. The postmodernist, I think, might be the one I'd want to address first, because that's a pretty clear distinction to anybody who's kind of paying attention to the big picture, is that the left has gone to this place where they just don't believe in objective reality anymore. Okay. And so if you don't believe in, the meanings of words and the fact that there is an objective truth, then, well, there's no limiting principle to restrain that ideology, right? So it goes off the rails, and that's what it's been doing. I think, on the gender thing specifically, the left has overstepped so far that that's actually turned a lot of people away from.
For sure it has.
Crap party. I mean, I know a lot of very left-wing people who said that was the line in the sand.
Yep.
And hard.
Well, now that you look at the gay community, like
yes.
They're like, we're not supporting this.
Yes.
Now they've drawn a line. Even
absolutely, my gay friends are some of the most vehemently against trans ideology.
Yes.
So it's just really that when you take away the meaning of words, well, first of all, that actually even refers back to the thing I said about Afghanistan with like 4 or 5 different languages in there. Well, if you and I are trying to have a conversation and we say the word, well, they like to weaponize language too, but let's even just start with woman, right? If we
What
can't
is a
agree
woman?
on what a woman is, then why do we even talk to each other? We can't. Like, there's no middle ground to find in between there. And then
I'm not going to have a conversation with you because you're a fluid gender, whatever. I don't even know what I like.
Right. Or if we come to something like, women's reproductive rights, right? Which is totally like, the framing of that is false. The phrase itself is propagandistic in that it's deliberately misleading and intended to demoralize the other side or to even cut them out from having a counterpoint. If we accept the premise that that's exactly what abortions are about.
Yep.
Right. Because it's absolutely not. It has very, very little to do. Well, I mean, we could go on about that at length, but that's, two people being able to say this, say the same words, have a different conversation in their minds. There was another good Pew study I looked at where they surveyed people sort of on these hot button issues, but when I looked at it, it was like just the way they phrased that statement and then asked, do you agree or disagree? Like, I can even read that in 2 different ways, depending on what different, like if I'm using the activist left-wing definitions of the words or the traditional, more dictionary-based definitions of the words. In fact, I would like to also just bring up, specifically to that point, the definition of the word racism, right? So we have these activists like Ibram X. Kendi, who's, sitting at he has his own department at Harvard for, CRT studies or whatever it is, and has actively tried to work against the traditional definition of racism, whereas racial prejudice specifically, which is a form of racism, would be like, making assumptions about somebody based on their skin color and not their actual individual character. And they tried to add that rider on there that usually used by, an oppressive group over a historically marginalized group. Basically, we know what that's doing. It's trying to say that there can't be such a thing as racism against white people. And they actually think that when they're using that definition, that's true to them. And it's the entire purpose of trying to insert that as an activist, but that's just not how language, yes, is supposed to be prescriptive and descriptive depending on what phase of learning language you're in, but that's an attempt to insert a prescriptive definition that's just not commonly accepted by most people because it's, well, for one, it's not true, but number 2, that's just not what most people think of when they use the word. So I could have, a long conversation with that dude about racism, but until we agree on definitions, we're never going to get anywhere.
No.
Right.
And that's what
so
it comes
we are
down
now
to.
Existing in 2 different cultures, living side by side, and so that's facilitating that division. Right?
And that's where that's the best way I've seen it or heard anybody put it. I mean, we have 2 different definitions living in 2 different cultures, and that's what it comes down to, is how. But it blows my mind, of how they allow that, or asking somebody while they're sitting in front of the Supreme Court, like, what can you define a woman? And they can't define a woman, and it's like, I'm supposed to support that. Yeah. I have a wife that is one of the most strongest, independent, incredible, childbearing, emotional, sensitive, strong. I mean, that's a woman. Yeah. Right? And then you ask a woman, I can't, well, what defines a woman? I'm like, why are we even entertaining this at this point? And then what really pisses me off, this is probably one of the most things that pisses me off the most about this whole entire political environment we're in, which is, it's hilarious to me. And this whole women equality, women's rights, softening the men type of deal, the funniest part about this whole entire movement of this feminist movement is they have proved that women will never, ever be equal to men. We have literally beat them in everything now. They used to have women's sports. They used to have beauty pageants. We're winning everything. These trannies are beating women in everything. And it's hilarious because this is what they wanted, equality, right? Now you mean to tell me that this woman just worked her whole entire life to become Miss Mississippi, and then now she stands on stage next to some tranny and he wins just because? But it's hilarious to me. Like, this is what you all wanted. Right. You all wanted equality. We couldn't just be happy knowing that women provide and do incredible things that men will never be able to do, and men will be able to provide and do things that women will never be able to do. We have our own roles. We have our duties as a civilization to be able to coincide and work together. Not anymore. They all want it to be equal, but it shows that, like, women's sports, a dude shows up as a tranny and now he's a woman, crushes all their records, shows up on a beauty pageant, wins. It's so comical at this point. But it's batshit crazy at the same time for me to sit back and watch and be like, oh, there's Miss America or some beauty pageant, and this dude just won. Like, and here I am as a girl dad, like, pushing my daughters, like, we can do everything. You can do anything better than anybody. And then now I'm like, you're not going to compete against any of this. And it's just comedy at this point. But where do we go? We're like, how far of this circus or is it going to continue before everybody realizes, like, okay, we fucked up. Like, we went too hard. We pushed too hard. And that's the craziest part, is the attack on women, I feel. And then you have this whole leftist mentality that they think everything is equal, and it's not. And they've had this belief where they've done all of this damage, and I feel the left has set women back hundreds of years. All of the fighting, everything that women have gone through to be able to be a CEO of a company, or to be a law enforcement officer, or be in a military combat unit, like all this stuff that have been like milestones for women to be able to compete on professional levels, all went to shit. They ruined everything by letting this whole entire movement and equality and all that bullshit come into play. And then now letting transgenders into these sports, it just shows it'll never be.
I don't know if you saw it, but actually the comedian Andrew Schultz did a really, really funny bit on that. Pretty much exactly what you're saying. But basically the gist of it was, like, I'm glad they're putting, men into women's sports right now. Like, the WNBA was boring, but now we got this, Brittany Griner. It's getting more exciting to watch.
Yeah, right? But he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. It was a really funny, way to put it. But it's actually tragic, but it's, one of those things that's funny because it's tragic.
It is. But it's the idiocracy going so far that now it's like, well, y'all wanted it.
Yeah. So,
y'all fought for this.
Yeah. So, we did postmodernism and Marxism in the picture. I think that's actually, a huge factor that, is kind of in this part of the conversation too. Is like, well, so we actually, and there was a sleight of hand, which is, it ceased to be about equality and it started to be about equity.
Okay.
And actually that was, I tried to date a girl a little while back who did the, women CEOs thing and told me, like, out of all the Fortune 100 countries, there's only like 2 women CEOs. I was like, yeah, well, I mean, so what? This is because, and that was the end of that entire conversation. Like, she left about, like, she finished the beer and left. But it's like, well, okay, but there's a difference between equity and equality, and failing to understand that, which I think is fairly common on the left. Is just like we have to address that before we can try to fix it.
Mm-hmm. How do you address it?
Return to meritocracy. Succeeding based on your capabilities, not your immutable characteristics. The way that we used to think, I think a lot of people not, smarter than me, but myself included, have observed that, like, in the 90s, we were mostly in a post-racial society. Like, nobody in high school cared what color your skin was. I remember back then, and then it got, reinvigorated. Thomas Sowell, actually, brilliant economist, said, racism isn't dead. It's on life support, being kept alive by politicians, because they need it for power. They need us divided for power, and so they have to. Yeah. So
I feel like we became extremely racist during the Obama administration when everything turned.
We did, and there's statistics to back it up. There's math to back it up. So we need to get back to that mindset of, who cares what your race or gender or sexual identity? Like, we don't care. Can you do the job? That's what matters.
Well, I think look at the Secret Service for this Trump debacle.
Perfect example.
And coming from obviously your background, I did executive security, owned an executive security company, done it all over the place, right? When literally sent to me within a minute of it happening, like, I mean, my phone starts blowing up, holy shit, and everybody sent, and I'm sitting on the couch with the wife, and I'm like, I think Trump just got attempt assassination on Trump, and I watch it. Yeah. And I'm watching this Secret Service detail. And the whole entire time I'm watching, I'm like, What are they doing? Why is it so long? Why are they so long? Why is he not up? Like, and then you're seeing these women, and the woman stands up and she's short. How are you supposed to protect a client or an asset that you're shorter than? And then you see these women fumbling. And I've trained with a lot of male law enforcement that were a complete shit show. I'll go on the record and say it. And my first thoughts were, I go, you mean to tell me Trump, out of all people, isn't surrounded by Navy SEAL? I'm watching this video like he doesn't have Delta dudes, right. SEALs. We all know he's a target. We knew this was going to happen. They've been predicting this and calling it forever. And you put this detail on President Trump?
There's a lot wrong with it. There's so much wrong with it. And
all because of the director of Secret Service wants to have equality and put women right. in there for what? That goes back to my point. There are roles and positions for everybody.
Yeah.
And that type of role and position is not for a woman. I'll say it. I don't care.
We used to say all the time, equal but not the same.
Equal but, yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. We are equal, but we're not the same. Huh. You can go and there's all kinds of details you can put them on, but like a high threat target like Trump, yeah. You're going to have a woman that can't even holster her pistol guarding him?
Exactly, right.
Like what the fuck circus are we living in right now? Yeah. But it just shows like they want to have equality. We have to have our, would it include, what's the term that they use?
DEI.
To have that. And it's, for what? And that just shows you right there that it is not a real thing.
DEI is pure Marxism. That's all it is. It's envy and wanting equal distribution of outcomes instead of equal opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's pure Marxism.
And I have no problem if somebody shows up, if a woman showed up and outperformed everybody, fuck, give her the job.
Yeah.
Give her the job. 100%. You rate that job. Mm-hmm. But if you came in 106 out of 110 out of your class and now you're on that detail just because you're a woman or you're black or you're Native American or whatever it is, that's the biggest crock of shit to me you can ever imagine. And that goes for any job, like anywhere. Everything should go to the best man or whatever, the best person. But now we have to have these quotas.
I think the U.S. is pretty culturally primed to move back in that direction. And
we're going to have to.
It's definitely, I think it is in progress.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
I feel like it's going to get a lot uglier before it starts to turn.
It will. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, the catalyst has to be that they personally feel the consequences of their dumb ideologies before they'll actually update their software, before they'll make a change in their beliefs. Because
how hard is that going to be to convince?
It's very hard because it is easier to convince somebody. It's easier to fool somebody than to convince somebody they've been fooled. People are stubborn. They don't want the cognitive dissonance or the admission of, okay, I was wrong, even though. For most people, I would look more highly on them, and most people look more highly on them when they admit, okay, I made a mistake.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
I learned more things. I got more information, and based on my new information, now I understand better.
Which is happening.
Yeah,
there's a shift. I hear I have a guy that's very interesting, very different beliefs, political, really everything. We are opposite. Yeah. And I get worked on by him, so it's like a therapy session. So he's stuck with me, and I'm stuck with him for an hour, every week. Nice. And so it's hilarious because when we first started working, I'd come home and be like, I think I'm not be able to work with this dude because he's just opposite. Everything supports trans, Black Lives Matter, critical race. He supports all of it, right? Mm-hmm. Fast forward a year, just our last conversation. He's like, this doesn't make sense. Like, what this? He's like, I'm not right, but he's like, a lot of this stuff isn't. And I'm like, if you just make it make sense, right. That's all you have to do. And that's all I ask people when I'm in not like an argument. I don't argue with anybody over politics anymore because it's just so funny to me. But it's just like whenever we get in these debates and I have questions, and that's one of the biggest things we teach our kids. Make it make sense. Right. Make it make sense. So you mean to tell me this, and this? Well, I feel. Well, you feel. So you're giving me a response out of emotion, not facts, and what the future is going to entail with this change. And it's just crazy to me. It's crazy. But a lot of people are starting to sway. But I feel that there is a huge core. There's a deep-rooted
Oh, there is.
group of people that'll never be convinced because the propaganda with our media, the propaganda on social media, all of these news outlets, like, how do you combat that and without shutting them? You're going to have to shut them down. And then what? Then you're a dictator country. And then what separates us or do we put more tighter rules and regulations on the media? How do you convince a country that they made a mistake, or not country, but I don't even want to say half the country, a huge demographic in this country that they've been lied to.
Yeah.
If you still have these platforms pushing this agenda, how do we switch that back?
I would refer to, I'm trying to give citations where I think they're due. Like another one of my very intellectual, I think, that I follow very closely is named Bret Weinstein.
Okay.
And I would go with his observation on that one. Basically, that this is why X was such a big deal for Musk to acquire Twitter and have it be.
Yeah.
We had some minor ones like Gab and Truth Social, right? But,
Never took off.
Yeah, echo chambers never took off, but X was already big. So the reason that can stand up against all of the behemoth of basically captured media is because for these kind of absurdities to continue to thrive, basically there can't be counter arguments. There can be net zero free speech platforms for that narrative to remain the dominant narrative. But the minute there's net one free speech platform that actually has some reach,
Yep.
the counter arguments and the truth are going to get out there.
But
Look how much news is broken on X before they did
anything,
right? So, and besides that, now you actually have a free marketplace. You actually have a space for those competing ideas to be discussed. And sometimes you're going to see like citizen journalists on there that are way ahead of the mainstream journalist narrative because they're the actual experts or because they're there on the ground and they're not getting, they don't have to get their information or what they're allowed to speak about filtered through the executives first.
Filtered is the biggest thing.
Yeah, they actually can just say what they think. So like the whole, even before Musk, like even under Dorsey, X was ahead of the game on COVID almost every single time. Twitter back then, but so that's as long as we can hold on to one, that's enough to kind of really have a massive difference.
Yeah.
It's not.
I feel like it's not enough though, when you're fighting these massive, just media moguls that are just pumping out, and then you watch it, right? You watch these reports, and I'm just like, what? Like, this makes no sense. And then you see people, and I hear people talking like, "Oh, did you hear about this? This happened." I'm like, when? Where? Like, where did you get this source? Oh, CNN. You mean to tell me you are still watching CNN? If you're still watching CNN, if you were still watching CNN in 2024 and you're believing what they say, you're a lost cause. There's no convincing these people to come back. If you think that CNN is the true source of news and updating the truth, I feel like they're fucking lost. Like, how do you bring somebody like that back that is convinced that?
The honest thing I don't think you actually do, because those are people who will deliberately put themselves in. They're the people who would rather accept an easy lie over hard truth. Can't really break them out of that. Like if that's ingrained in them, and they're not like the person I referred to who would only watch the very fine people clip, not the 5 seconds before or after. Well, that's because you just don't want to know. Right? So there's nothing to work with there. You can't negotiate with Hamas, for example, right? So, and you can't have an intellectual discussion with somebody who's anti-fact, who's like, will deliberately avoid watching a 5-second video that conflicts with their pre-established belief. There's no progress to be made there.
Yep. It's crazy, man. It is fascinating to sit back and to watch, especially I feel we were the last good era of the military until something drastically changes and starts over. Like, they need to bring hazing back. They need to bring all of it. I mean, that's what made us us. Like, when you picked up corporal in the Marine Corps and you knew you were getting your blood stripes and you're going to get the shit just beat out of you for the next several days where we're dragging dudes to platoon and getting them in formation because their legs are just destroyed from getting, need the customs and courtesy. But like all of that, I feel like that's when it really stood, like everything started to shift, is when they started taking away the stuff that built. I mean, obviously things got carried away, and I mean, you were early days, but like, what do these kids do now? They don't, I think that's where a lot of the camaraderie, the building, the friendship, none of that's there anymore. Like I'll go back and visit and everybody's just to the winds. Like we were such tight. Where else are you going to live with like 50 dudes in a squad bay? Just, you never know when you're going to get beat up, when the fight's going to break out, and somebody's putting freaking Tabasco sauce in while you're sleeping in your eye or dripping it down your back of your throat. Like that type of shit, like that's all gone, And then now it's like we got to live like that last good. It's just like the 80s kids, like we were the last good, like drinking out of a hose and parents looking for you because all the bikes in the front yard downtown, like I feel like that's how it was for us in this era of military. Like, I don't know how we ever go back to the hard charger, wild, crazy, belligerent days of just letting grunts be grunts, letting everybody just like go wild, obviously within our parameters of kids. But now it's like, dude, you hear about everybody getting NJP'd for everything, and dudes are going up for court martials left and right. And I mean, careers are ending every day. Back when we were, I mean, you crash a car into the back gate at Pendleton and your staff sergeant would come and grab you and hide you and sober you up as fast as you could. Now it's like, dude, you're done. Like you are done. And I feel like how do we revert back? Or does it have to get so bad that like we reset and then another giant war has to break out to bring back the war fighters?
Pretty much that, I'd say. Like there's, there's a lot of work to be done to get, the current generation to, it might be an impossible task, I would say, for sure. I mean, I share some of your point on hazing. I'm not super convinced that hazing in its entirety should be brought back, but there are some things that should. And in fact,
for sure. I mean, just pointless hazing was always the dumbest shit to us, right? But I speak not highly of hazing because I was a product of horrible hazing.
Yeah.
Horrible. Like, just fucking horrible. But there's a lot of really cool stuff, like, getting your blood stripes. When you get pinned, getting your pins pushed into you. Like, that type of stuff is what brought the pride out in you. The customs, the traditions, the everything that happened, like, those types of stuff, it sucks. Like field day, that was a hazing. The Marines, I don't know how the Army was. Every Thursday night when you got finished work, you went to the barracks and you field dayed till your NCOs cut you loose. It could be 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
We were doing Chinese field days where we would bring all of our shit. We lived on the third deck. You're reassembling your room on the basketball court. Wall lock, dudes were fucking just pushing wall lockers over the third rail, right? Like that's the type of hazing that like we need to bring. Like they don't field day anymore. I guess they do a general cleanup now. But like we had tricks. Like we knew what sergeant would be coming to inspect, and we knew what they like. We knew if they liked Otter Pops versus having a Playboy laying on the bed. Like we would, just to distract them so they wouldn't fuck with us all night. And then we were cleaning our rooms by the numbers. We would be in formation on the basketball court. Your roommate had 30 seconds to run up, scrub one tile, and then I would have to wipe the tile. And we're doing, I have to have a couple of my buddies on to talk about our field days, but like they don't even do that shit anymore. Right. It's all just a general cleanup. And then Friday morning, you know how terrified you were Friday morning knowing the battalion commander's walking through to inspect rooms? And you're just like, what was that, that orange oil that we used to spray on everything? We'd wipe everything down.
The cleaner?
It was
the Pine Sol?
It wasn't Pine Sol. It was like a finish. Like you would wipe it.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
It was an orange citrus flavor, but we would just coat everything in that. So, if you did it too much,
right,
you'd get hit on it. But if you did it enough, they would just be like, fuck, on everything they touch, you know, you're like, so we would start messing with these people
Nice.
and setting up things like I knew where they would reach, you know, and I'd put like a little bit of like Vaseline up inside like the air vent. So they'd run their hand on it. And then, you know, they're like, what the fuck is this? You know, and then we're like, you just want them to get out of your room as fast as possible. Never my tactic to just clean it. I always wanted to mess with somebody, which always got my roommate and I in a little bit of trouble. But like those types of days. And then if you failed inspection, I mean, dude, you're all weekend cleaning rooms. That's the type of hazing I feel like we need to bring back in the military. Not the stupid shit where just beating up people. And I mean, you hear some weird hazing stuff in some different units, but I'm talking like the customs and courtesies types of hazing, you know, just what made us who we were back then, you know, and now it's like, I'm like, what the fuck do you guys even do? Like, how do you even build camaraderie in these units? Like, go to the beach and have a barbecue. When we would go to the beach and we're allowed to do a barbecue, that was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah. So I don't really have necessarily a counterpoint, but more like a question on that one, which is just, and I'm not sure how we would even figure this out, but basically, so we know we're way below recruiting goals.
Oh, for sure.
Would the hazing work against recruiting quotas, or would it actually work for them?
See, but
that sort of esprit de corps, sense of camaraderie. I wonder.
I didn't know anything about hazing when I joined, but I think that's where it's at a unit level, right? Like, obviously you have to contain it where you're not, I mean, when I went to Afghan, the company that we took over from, they were like, I think it was on YouTube. We took over from Armor Group that had the embassy contract, and they were like putting broom handles and shit up to the dudes' asses that were new. Like, that's the type of stuff. Like, I don't care how young of a Marine I was. Somebody's going to do some, I'd be like, I'm out. Like, no, I'm not. I don't care how cool you guys are. I'm not doing that shit. Yeah. But you don't hear about like 10 of your NCOs now that you're a corporal. Like, you wait in your room and they're all giving you your blood stripes at night, you know, and it's like, and then you like that's the stuff you don't know about, but that's part of it. And then when you put that uniform on, you know you earn those fucking blood stripes. Yeah. You know, like that's the type of shit that needs to come back, and that's what makes units tight and knowing that. But obviously, you always have the guys that take it out of hand or go a little too much. But that's part of it. Like, oh, dude, I got the shit beat out of me when I pinned on you know, those are the stories. Like, those, I guess this new generation, like, what stories do they have? Right. That's, you know, that's how I look at it. And it's just like, it's so soft now. Everyone's so offended. Everyone's so soft. I mean, I never would have requested mass or talked to a freaking gunny or a master sergeant when I was a troop. And now these kids, I mean, they go talk to the chaplain. Like,
right. But I mean, what preparation do they have for that kind of environment, if any? You know, I don't know how these kids are being raised. I mean, like you said, drinking out of the garden hose. Well, you know, we're not doing that kind of stuff anymore.
Nope. It's a different breed.
So, just a question where they have the equipment to even deal with.
I know.
You know, the military as it was 20 years ago.
Probably not.
Really dare say not.
Yeah. Who knows, man? I guess we're gonna find out here in the next couple of years what's gonna happen.
It'll be interesting.
Very interesting. Well, dude, I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's been fun.
It's been a lot of fun. I'm glad we finally got to sit down and have this conversation, dude. And congratulations on just all the years and all the deployments that you did and put your body through. And now you just recently got out and you're starting a new chapter of your life. So I'm excited to follow up and see if there's where you go from here. And if you ever need anything, you know where we're at.
Awesome.
So
thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. It's been fun talking. Definitely down to do it again if you want to sometime down the road.
Anytime, dude. I'd like to catch up, especially once you get into the IT side of things and get dug into that. And once you get settled in there, I want to know the dirty side of the cyber world, which we all know it's a horrible place, but you'll have a little bit more grasp on what's actually happening. And so, yeah. Well, dude, thank you once again for coming on and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it, dude.
Thanks.
We'll have you back on again.
Right on.
Thanks, dude.